It appears to me that we have a quorum. I'll call the Transportation Commission meeting for January 12th, 2022 to order. And Joe, if you'd please read the instructions.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. City staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the Transportation Commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Aiden, if you'd call a roll, please.
Charles Miazzi.
Present.
Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Yes, here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
Bridget Brown.
Here.
Harold Cleaves.
Here.
Patricia Bennett. Robbie Weber.
Here.
Barbara Harrington McKinney.
Okay, I don't see Alder Harrington McKinney here, which would mean that you would be able to vote right now, Harold. So, okay. All right. We have an opportunity to look at the minutes from the last meeting in December. Alder Miazzi?
Motion to approve minutes.
Thank you. There's a motion. Chris, is that a second?
Yep.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Aiden or Joe, do we have any public comment under item number 1? We did get an email that everybody should have been able to read, but is there anybody registered to speak or registered for item number 1?
No.
No, okay. All right. Are there any disclosures or recusals this evening? Bill, go ahead.
I'd like to recuse myself from item number 8.
Okay. Is that because you work at the TAPS lab?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody else? Thanks, Bill. Okay. All right, the consent agenda was proposed for items number 2 through 5. Aiden and Joe, I last I heard we didn't have anybody registered for those items or registered to speak on those items.
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody wish to separate out any of those items 2 through 5 from the consent agenda? Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
sorry, Anne, this is Bridget, and I still don't know if I am going to be on the selection committee for TAP this year. And I should have mentioned this before. I was just debating, but I guess I would like to recuse myself from item 3, and so I think that pulls it off of the.
I have actually never had that come up before. I don't know why that would pull it off the consent agenda.
I don't know. Or if you can just note it in the minutes.
Yes, I think we can note that you would recuse yourself from item number 3, but that just means that you wouldn't be discussing or voting on it. I don't know that that would mean that it would have to come off the consent agenda. I've not ever heard that that would be a requirement. Anybody else heard anything that would impact that? Steve's here. Excellent. Steve, that wouldn't pull it off the consent agenda, would it?
No, I don't think it would pull it off the consent agenda, but she should refrain from voting on the consent agenda in that case.
Okay. All right. Yang, you had your hand up. Did you have something to add?
So I think Steve just said what I want to say. So I think that impact consent agenda. Thank you.
Okay. So because you're recusing from number 3, that means you would be recusing yourself from 2, 3, 4, and 5, all of them together, if that's okay.
There's no problem with that, with the number of votes, right?
No, there's no problem with that. Okay. All right. Okay. So the consent agenda consists of item number 2, Legistar 68965. Item number 3, Legistar 68977. Item number 4, Legistar 69002. And item 5, Legistar 69059. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Okay, Harold, is that a motion?
Move approval.
And Alder Miazzi?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? I assume not, since it's the consent agenda. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no. And we'll note that Bridget recused herself from these items. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to item number 6, providing certain guarantees to parking enforcement officers during their transition from the police department to parking. Tom Lynch, since Sabrina has recently left the city, Tom is here this evening to talk about this. I see Alder Harrington McKinney has joined us now. Welcome. So, Tom, did you have any brief comments and introduction?
Yeah, this resolution was initiated by some alders that wanted to assure parking enforcement officers, and it essentially says that we will not make major changes in their classification, pay, types of work in the next couple of years. We really weren't intending on doing that right now. Right now we're still trying to provide a more deliberate transition plan. And so that's what our focus is on, software, communications, and the like. The transportation department has no objection to this resolution. And I believe the alders who sponsored it feel like it helps assure some of the parking enforcement officers. So I think that's the intent of the resolution right now.
Okay, and we've had long discussions about this movement of the parking enforcement officers. Does anybody have any questions for Tom about what's included? Bridget, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, I'm just curious. So do these officers have protective status? And would that continue automatically, or could that even continue automatically?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if Aaron from HR is here or not. However, Aaron from HR has reviewed this resolution, and they did not have concerns about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, are there other questions about the resolution or the move? Okay, seeing no hands, do we have a motion on this resolution? And Harold, you would not be able to vote right now since Alder Harrington McKinney is here. Robbie?
Move approval.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, Denise, I assume that's a second?
Yep, second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Alder Miazzi, go ahead.
Can you record me as abstaining from this? I wasn't one of the alders that sponsored this move, so I just want to abstain from or I'll put me down for no for this. So if you want to have a roll call,
If you choose to, if you would prefer a roll call vote, we can certainly do that.
you can do that.
Sure. Did you want to address your concerns to the group?
I guess I probably did on the Common Council floor that I didn't like this move from the beginning, and I believe it shouldn't have happened. I feel for those people that actually have to go through this transition. So if this is good or not, I still want to not vote on this one or vote no.
Okay.
For it.
Do you prefer to show as abstaining, or would you prefer a roll call vote so that you have the opportunity to vote no?
Yeah, let's do a roll call vote.
Okay. Aiden, if you would, please. Is there any further discussion on the topic before we get to that? Okay. Unless you had anything further, Alderman Yazzie, your hand is still up. No. Okay, great. Aiden, if you would do a roll call vote, please.
Charles Miazzi,
No.
Barbara Harrington McKinney,
I'm going to abstain.
Chris McCahill,
Aye.
Denise Jess,
Aye.
Bill Bremer,
Aye.
Bridget Brown,
Aye.
Patricia Bennett,
Aye.
Robbie Weber.
Aye.
So that's 6 ayes, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
Okay, so the motion is carried. Okay, thank you, Tom. All right, next we move on to item number 7. Justin, is Justin here with us tonight? There he is. Hi, Justin.
Yep. Hello.
If you just want to give a brief introduction, it's such a large amount. I thought it was good for us to at least have a little bit of a discussion about it.
Yep, absolutely. So this is approving a contract with HNTB. It's a consulting firm to provide construction management support for the bus rapid transit project. The scope of work for this contract would be reviewing the design plans for constructability, working with contractors to cultivate bids, doing inspections of the actual work that happens on the ground, working with neighbors, business owners, property owners, tenants adjacent to construction activity to inform them of construction and work with them to make sure that we minimize disruptions, doing materials testing of concrete and steel to make sure that it all meets all of our standards, as well as some of the FTA compliance things that we need to do in terms of reviewing payrolls to ensure of our contractors to make sure that they meet all the federal standards, doing quality control assurance tests and kind of process, as well as doing risk assessments, which is part of the FTA process. So it's kind of a laundry list of things. It's very typical for these sorts of projects, and I would say is in almost every project there is a contract like this. However, as I mentioned, just because of the size of the overall project at $160 million, this project or this particular contract is quite large, and so it deserves specific discussion. The contract would be for just a little under $5.4 million. That would kind of get us through the entirety of the project, and again, that the amount is comparable to, on a percentage basis of the project, is very comparable to other projects of this size. So we used a lot of comparables with other cities through the FTA process to ensure that this was an appropriate dollar amount. So, and this was a competitive selection. It was an open RFP. However, we only had one respondent. HNTB was the only response. HNTB is a very strong firm. They've done this sorts of project before. They're actually doing this on the Milwaukee BRT right now. So they are very well suited to this type of work. The challenge is just, staffing is a challenge everywhere right now. And this is a big project and requires a lot of staff. And they were the only ones who were able to assemble a big enough team to actually accomplish this work. Whereas they've actually got a lot of sub-consultants they've partnered with, many of the other kind of medium-sized consultants throughout the city they've partnered with in this proposal to assemble a team big enough to actually deliver the project. So again, certainly we always hope to get multiple responses, but HNTB is a very qualified one. They've brought in a good team. And the other piece here is that because of federal rules, pricing is not the proposals by definition cannot include pricing. So it is not, it's competitive selection based on qualifications only. It is not it's not a price-based selection. So in that situation, since HTB is a strong qualified team, we felt comfortable moving forward. So, but yeah, just to reiterate, pricing is actually not only did we not select pricing, we're actually not allowed to ask for pricing to meet FDA regulations for this type of service. So, so all the pricing is negotiated after the selection is made. But happy to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Justin, for providing a little bit of context. So you mentioned they worked on or are working on the Milwaukee BRT project. Do you just happen to know some other either BRT or other transit projects that they have been the consultants on?
Yeah, so they've done quite a bit of work. Actually, Indianapolis, they did the Red Line project that I worked on as a construction manager. They do a lot of work on some of the Kansas City projects. They're actually headquartered in Kansas City. So the streetcar and some of the light BRT projects in Kansas City they've worked on. They've done a little bit of work in Minneapolis and kind of a handful of projects across the country. They're a national firm. So, yeah, I mean, and actually the project manager that they proposed is actually the same individual who's managing the Milwaukee project. The timing kind of works out well for them to where that project's supposed to be wrapped up at the end of this year, right as about the time that we start construction. So it was kind of nice timing for that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other comments or questions for Justin? Okay, seeing no hands, we need a motion to approve this resolution. Chris?
Yep, move approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Robbie, is that a second?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no. If so, please raise your hand and we'll do a roll call vote. Okay, motion is carried. We will now move on to the high injury network.
All right.
So, go ahead, Renee.
That's right. Yang can introduce it if you would like.
Go ahead, Renee.
All right. So we have Andy from the UW TOPS lab with us here tonight. So for those of you who have not been on the committee a long time, the high injury network is kind of a key piece of data that helps sort of with the Vision Zero project and helps sort of focus in on the places where you need to give your attention first. So we are here tonight to look at the methodology. We have had a few conversations about kind of how to approach this in the best way. And since we are fortunate to be a university town, a town that has a lab that really focuses in on these kinds of issues, we decided that it would be best to kind of bring them on. They've been a part of our stakeholder task force to kind of help us give this a more rigorous review and come up with the best kind of methodology for this that we can, so that we can keep this project moving forward, but we can also best use the data that is available to be making decisions with Vision Zero. So Andy's here. I don't know, Yang, if you want to add anything before Andy brings up her presentation.
Thank you, Renee. No, you covered it really well. But I guess since you asked here, I just want to thank Andy and others at the UW team for helping us out on this very important task. I cannot stress enough what it means for our future work, really to Vision Zero and all other safety improvements. So this network really sets a guideline for us on how to prioritize our investments. So critically important, and we're so lucky to have experts like Andy and others just in our backyard, and so they really help us to deliver some really good products. With a very small budget. So really appreciate that. Here I also want to thank the commission, for working with us through the process. We have been here for a few times now. So every time we are here, we get tons of really good inputs. So we appreciate that. So that's how we can get to here today. I think the collaboration of staff, the UW team, and the commission really, I think, going to deliver a really good product on this. I also want to quickly mention that we including a draft version of the hydrogen network. That's a version that you are seeing tonight. With our kind of final draft of the Vision Zero action plan. So we hope to get support on this version tonight, and whatever the version approved by the adopted by the commission, we would like to include the final version in the final version of the action plan that we'll start going to introduce a resolution and get the whole plan adopted at the council in the next few weeks. But I also want to say that this document is also just like the Vision Zero action plan. The hydrogen network going to be a living document that we plan to update frequently, based on the new data comes in. But I will say the methodology that the UW team have developed, I think is will be something that's going to live, and we really want to base our network on data and also the most recent data that we can have our hands on in the future. So with that, I'll pass it on to Andy.
Thank you so much. Just a mic check. I got a thumbs up that you guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint slides here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to all of you today. As Renee and Yang mentioned, this is not only a great project because of the data and the analysis that we're doing, but as always, we want to be part of the community, right? And so we want to make sure that we're helping improve traffic safety in our backyard, right down the street from us, and all around campus as well. So we, as much as Yang was thanking us for the opportunity, we want to make sure we thank you guys for the opportunity as well. So as was mentioned, my name is Andy Bill. I'm the Associate Director at the Traffic Operations and Safety Laboratory. I'm going to be going through our methodology that we could put together for the high injury network for the city of Madison. I'm going to start with some background information. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, but just make sure that we're all on the same page here. So as you're quite familiar with, as we Originated in Sweden in the 1990s. It was proven successful across Europe and gaining acceptance in the U.S. You guys are adopting Vision Zero and moving forward with it, which is amazing. And I know several other cities in Wisconsin are following your lead based on this. So thank you for being leaders in this. I just came back from the annual meeting of the Transportation Research Board in D.C. This is where thousands of transportation professionals get together from across the world. It was smaller than usual because of COVID, but we had a lot of talk about Vision Zero and safe systems and really moving from just the wording of Vision Zero, but actually the implementation of Vision Zero, which is what you guys are doing here in Madison. So we know that the commitment is to build and sustain leadership, collaboration, and accountability, and this is happening from all areas, and everybody that's on this board is we're looking at transportation professionals, public health officials, police, policymakers, and community members. And it's really understanding and collecting, analyzing, and using data, and really having a data-driven approach to this. We want to understand trends. We want to look at the potential disproportionate impacts on certain populations. We want to make sure that we are prioritizing equity and community engagement through the process. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. If you've taken any one of my classes, you'll know that I get on a little bit of a soapbox about speed, which I won't do today, but making sure that we're managing speeds to a safe levels, and then setting the timelines to achieve zero traffic deaths and serious injuries. As we think about this, one component of Vision Zero is this high injury network. And this is a data-driven approach to safety analysis and decision making. And I'll go through all of the methodology here, but it looks at mapping of the roadways in the network where high numbers and severity of crashes are concentrated. And we want to look at those geographic areas where crashes are concentrated and focus efforts on the most challenging areas and then the crash factors associated with it. This gives us a strength in collaboration for roadway improvements and education campaigns. The two words that I use most often with talking with folks about traffic safety work and the infrastructure improvement and other improvement that we do is that we need collaboration and communication. We cannot do this with without those two C's. And so really bringing together a diverse group of people to look at the data and analyze it, and then being able to have this so we can communicate it out is really important. And then it gets into prioritizing the investments to make changes to the infrastructure as needed to improve safety. Here are examples from across the country of different high injury networks. You'll see different types of methodologies. It all kind of comes back to the statistical standpoint, and I'll get to that here, hopefully without boring you guys on a Wednesday night here. So this is the city of Bellevue, Washington. This is looking at 56% of fatal and serious injury collisions occur on 7% of the city's total street network, and this is looked at by measured in length, not lane miles, but just the length of the roadway here. And so it just kind of highlights where they should be looking at that high injury network. This was done for a metropolitan plan or regional planning commission in Ohio, and looking at this side of things, and it's in Franklin. So this is Columbus area as well as then Delaware County as well too. So another kind of high injury corridors that look at it. And this was kind of more looking on the state highway systems, maybe not as much at the local levels. There's another one, San Francisco, that looked at it. So with every great research project, we have to start with the literature review, right? We don't want to recreate a wheel. We want to make sure that we understand how the wheel has been working to this point, and if we need to improve upon it, or how we, what we need to do with it. So a lot of this work was just we analyzed what other areas were doing and seeing how we did it. So one thing that San Francisco did was they did intersections and segments together and kind of combine those onto this map and looking at it. And then as we think about the kind of our methodology, we couldn't have done this work without the City of Madison transportation staff and being able to help us get the data. As always, if it's your output is only as good as your input of your data. And so we really wanted to make sure that we had good data that went along into it. So from our City of Madison was amazing in getting us our network segmentations. This included over 4,500, almost 4,600 intersections, 8,800 segments of roadway. And then we have our crash data collection, and the Traffic Operations and Safety Laboratory houses the Wisconsin Department of Transportation crash database. So we have all crashes that occur within the state. We're obviously here, we're only looking at City of Madison, but we go back to all the way 1994. We looked at crash data collection for this is 2017 to 2019. The intersections had a 250-foot buffer around it. Just because of sometimes how crash reports get filled out, sometimes the locations aren't always, 100% correct in those locations. We kind of just move to different areas. And so for the intersections, we want to make sure we include a buffer around it. For the segments, we looked at continuous mid-block roadway segments that are outside of that intersection buffer that went along with it. So the roadway was either looked at into intersections or segments, and then we put the crash data on top of it. As was mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we developed a practical and repeatable process to obtain the high injury network. It's no good just to have a network that sits on the shelf and doesn't kind of get added to each year and looked at it a little bit. So we took our time to make sure that we could develop this process in an Excel format and things of that sort to be able to hand over so that this can be done each year and looking at it. The statistical analysis has included crash frequency and what's called equivalent property damage only. And that's the thing that I'll take a little bit of time to go into our analysis. At any point, if there are questions now or later, I can take them too. I'm kind of watching to see if there's hands that go up, but if someone else sees it, let me know that. So you got to love a good graphic here. So we, thinking about how we developed the City of Madison High Injury Network, we looked at our network segmentations. You can see the data elements that we collected there in the yellow and the green boxes. With it, we then added to the crash data on that side, and that's kind of what I was talking about before. We then looked at some crash frequencies, and our focus areas included kind of all crash, pedestrian and bicycle crashes or our vulnerable road users, speed, alcohol, drugs, hit and run, dark and light conditions. So looking at different types of, was it lit or unlit, and then different seasonalities with it. We then take that crash frequency, and because we have a whole bunch of severities, and I'll talk about that, we want to normalize those crash severities. And so from there, we go ahead and do what's called an equivalent property damage only. And this normalizes it. It does weight the fatal and injury crashes up from the property damage only, but it gives everything kind of one comparison value. And I'll go into that here in just the next couple of slides. And then from there, we did a kind of an evaluation of risk level. So by facility type, focusing on the area and kind of looking at those equivalent property damage only, we did different categories to get to our high injury network, which I'll talk about here. Okay. So from a crash frequency standpoint, we're just counting up the number of crashes over a period of analysis at our roadway facility. It's not normalizing it. It's just looking at that total number with it. And then roadway segments, since our segments in between our intersections can be various length, we normalize that to crashes per mile with it. And then as we think about that EPDO, which is what that equivalent property damage only factor is, it uses a safety measure that allows fatal and injury crashes, which we're going to call CAPCO because that's the injury severity that's used on our crash report forms. K stands for fatal, A stands for suspected serious injury, B is suspected minor injury, and C is possible injury. And we normalize those to the property damage only crashes. So it's just a different way of normalizing it to make sure that we are including and really focusing on those fatal and high severity crashes. We have what's a really neat way of thinking about things here in Wisconsin. We have what's called the CODES program, which is the Crash Outcome Data Evaluation Systems, because what would an engineer be without a couple more acronyms in the presentation for you? We link our crash records to our hospital records. And so we're actually able to get the costs, the crash costs of the crashes here in Wisconsin. So we're not using some National Safety Council numbers or anything that's kind of from a national standpoint. We're really using our Wisconsin numbers for that. And then these weights were estimated to determine those equivalencies, which I'll get to in just a second. We did a project for the Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization that looked at crashes from 2012 to 2016. So, this methodology is also being used at the MPO level as well, too. So we did by crash types. We looked at motor vehicles versus pedestrian crashes. So those are called our PED crashes. We looked at motor vehicle to our bicycle crashes. Those are our bike crashes. And then our motor vehicle crashes, which is just, this could be a single vehicle, or it could be a multi-vehicle crash. So we kind of broke it down into those 3 levels with it. And you can see the severity on the left-hand side of that table. That's what's coming from our law enforcement reported severity at the time of the crash. And then you can see the crash costs, which come from the records that we have from the hospital side of things, from that codes data that really looks at it. And then what we do here is we're going to, take what this vehicle property damage only, so this $24,322 is, and that's going to be our base level. So that's our 1. And then what we do is we just take these other numbers and divide it by that, and that gets us our weights on this side. You might be looking at those weights and you're going to say, Andy, wait a second. How is a vehicle crash have a higher rate than maybe a weight than ped and bike crashes to it? And unfortunately, some of this is that our vulnerable road users are going to sustain a very serious injury, or unfortunately a fatality right at the scene of the crash. And so they might not have those long-term costs associated with being in the hospital for a while, as some of our motor vehicle fatality crashes and things of that sort. So, that kind of takes some of that into that consideration on that side. So it's sometimes a little hard to kind of see those differences with it. I think that we look at our kind of in suspected serious injury or incapacitating injury crashes, you can see that those kind of fall out more to what we kind of expected to see a little bit. These weights are still very heavy on our making sure we're looking at where our fatalities and our suspected serious injuries are. So they're really getting back to that main mission of Vision Zero, is making sure that we're focusing on those while still taking into consideration trends that might be happening from lower level severity of those crashes. So, this is just a way, instead of doing with these large numbers for those crash costs, it's kind of that weighting. So this is just one example that one vehicle crash with an incapacitating injury is equivalent to, we call it at 16 vehicle crashes with the property damage only. So, one crash is equated to 16 of those property damage only crashes. Same thing with a PED with a fatal injury. It's equivalent to 136 vehicle crashes with the property damage only. So that's kind of where those methodologies and those weightings come from. So from here, and again, I won't bore you guys with all the statistical models. If anybody wants to talk about them afterwards, Yang and Renee know how to get a hold of me. I love talking about statistical models, but I won't do that today during this meeting. We go through the models and then we come up with the network associated with it. Sorry, this is an example of the bicycle crash. So we do a safety analysis of those intersections and segments based on those weights that we have. So we're looking at those crashes, looking at what those weights would be, adding those weights to it. We looked at locations with an EPDO higher than a threshold, and what we picked for this one was a 65th percentile threshold. As you could see from some of the other jurisdictions that we did some analysis with, anywhere from like 50 to 85, and we picked that 65 just kind of right in the middle there. And then we did a mapping of high injury intersections and segments, and this is a combination of influence areas on the high injury facilities as well. So we did the analysis. We turned the analysis back over to the City of Madison, which then put together a beautiful kind of draft high injury network map for us at this point in time. And I know I don't necessarily want to get into the, looking right at the details of each and every intersection at this point in time, but just wanted to kind of walk you through our methodology that we used. It's data driven. It's based on the literature that's out there. We really wanted to make sure we used a high statistical significance modeling standpoint that could be repeatable and used from year to year to be able to come up with this high injury network. And with that, here's my contact information. Dr. David Noyce, who's a dean within the College of Engineering and leads our TOPS lab, and then Boris Claros, who's on the call with us, helped us, and then Madhav Tuturi. So this is our team that worked on it, and I will answer any questions that folks have, or if you want to reach out to me later to talk about statistical models, let me know that as well too.
Okay, what questions do you have for Andy or for Yang or Renee? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for presenting this. And as Yang said, I mean, we've seen this in various forms a couple of times, and so it's really nice to see how it has developed and get some of the methodological detail. So I do have some follow-up questions about these details. Let's maybe start with a straightforward one. So you say 65th percentile is the cutoff, the threshold that you picked, and that's the percentile of what?
Yeah, great question. So we looked at the network in general, and then looked to see in kind of the distribution of the weights for each of that network. And then we looked at to say, okay, based on the weights, 65% of the segments had kind of were lower than that, and then we mapped the higher ones on that. So if you think about the kind of the distribution of the network with the different weights, and then we said, okay, let's look at the 65% and above to map it. Does that answer your question?
So of any segment, no matter whether there was a crash there or not, right? Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, so that leads me into maybe the next question regarding the Epdo model. And can you say something about, I mean, it makes a lot of sense how that system works and that a property damage only crash, if you look at the multipliers, it's not terribly likely to show up on the high injury network map. But I mean, specifically, we talk about the high injury network and not about the high crash network. So do you know if any locations that just have a high number of property damage only crashes actually made it into the map?
That's an excellent question, Harold, that I don't necessarily know off the top of my head, but I can look into it and then get some information back through Renee and Yang to you on that. That's a great question.
Yeah, because I mean, conceptually, I mean, I think I would be somewhat uncomfortable because, I mean, we've had discussions here at the Transportation Commission that, I mean, certain treatments might lead to an increase in crashes, which might lead to an increase in property damage, but they prevent fatal and serious crashes, which is very much what Vision Zero is all about. I think ensuring that the methodology matches that approach, I think, would be really important.
Great point. Yeah, so we'll check and we'll get that information back to the group.
Okay, thanks. And then maybe getting a little bit more specific, but maybe this is related to the questions that I've asked. So looking at the map, I mean, I was wondering, like, which intersections show up, which segments show up there. And so I was like, oh, interesting. Like, for example, there's like Mendota Drive, low traffic road, low speed generally, but still it made that cutoff. So I went to community maps, looked up like, what was that crash? And it seems like it was an injury crash with a B level severity, which I guess is the second. It's not incapacitating, but it's the one below. And that was the only crash at that intersection. So then I was like, that's not how I thought about the high injury network then I was like, okay, well, we have a 3-year period, maybe an intersection that over 3 years has a single B level severity injury crash should be on here. But it made me think a little bit. And then I saw some other residential low traffic streets that probably are in a similar spot where you basically have one injury, but not incapacitating or fatal crash, and they still make it on there. And so I'm kind of wondering if you can talk about that a little bit. One piece of feedback that I had provided early on in the process when looking at some of the draft maps, I was like, high injury network seems to encompass a lot, and there's arguments for that, there's arguments against that, and it depends a little bit how we are going to use it. But maybe you can comment on that, and maybe that is also a good question for Yang and Renee in terms of how we're going to use that map.
Yeah, I'll defer to Yang and Renee about the map itself. I have to look back at some of the specific segments that you're talking about, but I'll take a look at that. But 3 years of the data, sometimes we see things changing in that. But first of all, thank you for using community maps. It's something else is near and dear to my heart, so I love hearing that through it. But it could be just that that intersection or segment, depending on where it was, is maybe not all intersections with that same, like a stop control to a signal might not have had the same type of situation, but for the stop control side, that intersection did pop up with just one B crash. So I'll take a look at into those kind of specific areas. And if you see other ones, if you want to let Renee know, Renee and I can go through and look at those and just kind of see what our data is showing, so we can report back on the numbers to you about where that kind of stands in, just to kind of have a little bit more confidence in that, and being able to compare it to maybe something else that's kind of a low speed, low volume segmentation of the roadway. Renee, I'll turn it over to you about the map itself and kind of how you're planning on looking at it.
Sure, and I mean, Yang, you can jump into, but obviously, we've been using the Sanitary network to help us with looking at project locations and, helping us just as one of the data points in, the Safe Streets Madison. We were using it previously for Vision Zero. I mean, it's in the action plan to help us, moving forward and making the best possible decisions.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's partly why I'm like where my question is going. Like, I mean, does it make sense, for example, with Safe Street Madison, to prioritize a project where there was a single crash over 3 years? Like, should that, because being on the high injury network gives your project a pretty high number of points, and so I'm not feeling super comfortable with that.
Yeah, so I just want to add that these are really good points, and our city is not that big, but it's not that small, and as Andy kind of presented, we have thousands of intersections and thousands of segments, and I think for sure you're going to find some kind of outliers that may not fit into any structure very well. So I think some kind of that probably should be expected. I think Renee talked generally about how we use the tool. Right, this is a tool that we use. So this is not everything that we refer to when we prioritize our investments. With that said, this is going to be very valuable. So we can have some big picture ideas on the safety situations in the city, especially on fatalities and injuries, and the general idea on where we should focus on resources. But I want to say that for every project we're developing, we are going to look into the detailed data behind this. So we're going to pick out those things may not actually make sense. And sometimes we do see because of some weird reasons, a small road actually may end up being on here. That might be something that's maybe really hard, for us to intervene, with reasonable cost, and that investment may be better used for somewhere else. So I think we use this as a tool, but when we develop any project, we're going to go behind the data, and trying to dig out what happened for each crash, and what are some factors involved, and what is possible for us to do, and what makes most sense on citywide scale. So I'll say that's great questions, but we may not have a perfect answers. But I think general, I feel like general direction is is definitely a good one. I'll stop over there, and we can talk much more later.
Yeah, thank you. And one final question. Did you exclude any roads based on jurisdiction? Because one thing I noticed at Toten Road didn't seem, some of the ramps do not show up, but I know there have been fatal injuries on many parts of it. So I was wondering if you excluded any of those for jurisdictional reasons.
Yes, we did. So we were just looking more at the city of Madison owned, maintained roadways.
Okay.
Is that the correct term, Renee? Owned and maintained?
So it was the city, the ones that are maintained by the city. And I think we did decide to include the UW as well, knowing that they've been participating with us on this project. So that was helpful for them as well.
Okay, so if I see something...
on that, sorry. On that, I want to quickly add that so Andy and her colleagues did provide us, a different version with those roadways on. So even though we're not going to use those publicly, because those are, we don't have much control on those roadways, unless one day that changes. But we, in our back pocket, we do have those information. And we do want to work with our colleagues, at Wisconsin DOT, for example, at the county, for example, and at UW, for example, trying to work together to, make things better. And on that, we also have different other type of maps that Andy and the team has provided us, which are quite helpful. For example, focus on different factors such as speeding, alcohol use, those kind of things. So we'll continue to use that, again, as we develop projects.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I think in terms of when you display the map, the belt line, for example, that you do see a lot of red, but I guess that's the frontage roads. And so, people may think the crashes on the belt lines actually happen where they don't happen. So that's just something to keep in mind when you communicate with those maps. Thanks. That's all I had.
Hey, thanks, Harold. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation and the work on this. I had really similar line of questioning. So maybe just follow up on some of that conversation. I also thought the map was a little redder than I would expect. I had a question about also the 65th percentile. And I think this map is included in the current Vision Zero report. And it cites something like 15 or 16% of roads make up the height.
16% like mileage, 16% of road miles.
Okay, so what's the difference between that and the 65 that we're talking about here? And maybe this will be futile to talk through and easier to see on paper, but.
Yeah, so Chris, if you think about it, we took all of the stop controlled intersections and said, okay, what is the EPDO for each one of those intersections, and then laid them out in a distribution format. And then we said, okay, we looked at different options to say, okay, based on that, which percentile should we use to say that, again, on all of this kind of that high level of side of things, right? Because we're going to go up on our EPDO, we cut it off at that 65%. So it's not based on lane miles, it's based on EPDO weights for a given roadway type. Am I making I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. And then I guess just to that point of the number of segments that are showing up here, I can see the case for lighting up more roads versus less. I think on the one hand, I think Yang, what you were saying was, by having more segments in the network, we can do like a crosswalk of where there's high injury network and we have solutions, that we can turn to. So that I guess is one of the benefits. The other use though would be like, if we really want to tackle our biggest problems, then we would want to look at, understand what is the 5% of our worst network. So in the tools behind this, is it easy enough to do that at least?
Yeah. Renee and team probably could say we've peppered them with probably more information than they so they've got maps that are looking at all different levels on it, and so they have all that back-end information with it.
Okay, awesome. I had another question, and now I don't remember what it was. Oh, I know what it was. Andy, you said something to Harold's question about, he saw the road where there had been just one crash and it popped up. you said something about it being, oh, it was a stop control. Maybe it's a stop control. But so does the geometry and characteristics of the road itself play into this, or is it just the crash numbers?
No, it's so we wanted to compare apples to apples as much as possible. So when we are comparing the segments or intersections, take what you pick, against each other, we want to try to compare similar types of intersections against each other. So we didn't compare our stop control numbers to our signalized numbers because those are two completely different types of crashes and things that are happening to it. So when we did that 65% percentile, we did it by each of the characteristics of like either intersections or segments based on that. So that was why in the data collection, it was so important to have those characteristics that were kind of in that bubble a little bit to show, so we could kind of compare like intersections to like intersections, or segments to segments.
I'm not sure who this is a question for then, but does that make it harder for us to find what are, let me think here. So like, I can imagine that like there are certain types of segments and intersections that are the most problematic, our faster, wider roads, whatever the case may be. Does that make it harder for that to come out of the data? If I think that might be, I guess to Harold's point, that might be why some of these more local roads are jumping out when we wouldn't expect them to.
Yeah, I mean, all the data is there, so you could filter it by, signalized or just looking at pure. If you just want to, just to look at all of the intersections and then just look at the total EPDO for that, for all intersections together, you'd be able to look at that as well too. So it's an Excel document that you can filter any which way that you would like to be able to look at that information. So, as you're going through and examining the crashes and trying to figure out what those countermeasures should be out there, those are some of the things you might want to look at too. And a lot of this goes back to, again, just maybe bundling some projects as well together. So, maybe, sometimes we see from an evaluation standpoint is doing some pedestrian work all along a corridor is sometimes better because then people have the expectancy of it all through it. And so, not saying that that's happening here or anything else of that sort, just for some of the other work that we do for other municipalities is sometimes it's easier just to put that all the way down through it. So let's be things about it.
Okay, thanks. I guess, yeah, I mean, that all makes sense from a practical, use of the data and guiding our decisions and stuff. It does make me wonder about what's the right thing to show on the map. What is the official high injury network? So I'm just kind of thinking through that. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, and just one thing to consider too is if you just did fully EPDO, it's going to be more biased towards those signalized intersections. And I know you kind of it would completely miss those low traffic intersections as well too. So kind of keeping that in mind too. If it just is hard, the balance of it. And so thinking about it from that standpoint, so you're not just biasing to those high volume signalized intersections.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Thanks for asking a question, Chris, to help me understand this more. I mean, I understand the point that, we want to look at some smaller intersections as well. But from a Vision Zero perspective, where, we need to eliminate fatal and serious injuries over 8 years to get to zero. I think it makes a lot of sense. And calling it the high injury network where most injuries happen, I think we have to be a little bit careful in how we communicate that. We're like, oh yeah, there aren't a lot of high injuries on this particular intersection, but because it's stop controlled, it's still high injury. So I'm a little bit conflicted about this, and I'm glad there's some clarity. I have a better understanding now, but yeah, this is not a question, I guess. Sorry.
So it's a great point. Thanks for communicating.
Yang, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Yeah, I agree with Andy that Herb definitely had a great point. On the other hand, I think we can think about the benefit of separating different types of roadways is that we know sometimes no matter how much resource we spend on for example on busy roadway, you may not actually be able to change things that much just because the characteristic of the roadway. And for example, because signal control, you are for sure going to have more kind of right-end crashes, for example. But for those amount of money, if you spend maybe on a stop control roadway, even though this one has three injury crashes in 3 years instead of 30 injury crashes on the signal light intersection, but by spending $10,000, you may actually make a difference. Reduce that to 3 or get rid of those 3 injury crashes. This $10,000 may not make much difference. If you invest on that, on a signalized intersection, just for example. So I think from that standpoint, it makes sense as well. But I agree, it's dedicated balance, and definitely for the users who use the data, they have to understand all the things behind that, so that so we are consciously making an investment choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions? I do, but I want to make sure everybody else has their chance first. So everyone's mentioned that this is an evolving high injury network, that it will change over time as additional information becomes available. So as we look to approve this adopt this high injury network tonight, when would you contemplate that you would be coming back to the TC to look at it in the next generation of high injury networks? Because that may give folks who are thinking we may have some things to work out yet in the future, that we'll have another opportunity to look at it, to see how we can use this information and how it may be able to be improved or modified to be more helpful, even more helpful in the future. Because I think this is, an excellent way for us to help direct our resources.
So I can thank you. I can answer that question. That's a really good one. So one of the major objective that we have been working with Andy and the team is that we want to make this process repeatable, not too much burden for city staff to update the network based on the new data coming in. So I think Andy and the team have been doing a really good job on that. So as she mentioned, everything is in spreadsheet format. So all the structure was set up. So our plan really is to update this annually. Maybe along with the annual crash report, we have New Year's data in. Let's import those to this as well, and just to see what has changed. So that is our current plan right now. So we plan to bring this back to the commission annually, so we can review and we can discuss and we can keep improving it. I do want to point out that I feel it's probably very positive that we'll be keeping working with the TOPS lab, on future improvements. But we may not get the resources, every year to get them, involvedly, ask them to spend countless hours on this, like we have done in the past few months. So we may not be able to, make a kind of fundamental methodology change very often. But at least, we'll import the new data and maybe make some minor adjustments every year, and we come up with a new version. and at a time that when we feel like we may have to make some major adjustments, we may we can do that again too. As things change. Mm-hmm. But that will not be on annual basis.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that might help address some of the questions that, as we work with it and as we see how it goes, that, we will have an opportunity on an annual basis to take a look at it and evaluate those things. And, certainly we can get additional follow-up information as it's available. And I'm certain we'll be talking about this as we talk about Safe Streets Madison as well. So other comments or questions? Okay, I would look for a motion to adopt the high injury network, remembering that Bill is recusing himself from this. Is there a motion to adopt? Chris?
Yeah, I would move that we adopt the network, but I think when this is included in Vision Zero and other documentation, I think we need to be more transparent about what it's representing and that it's not simply the most dangerous segments, that it's the most dangerous segments and intersections by type. So I guess that's my motion.
Okay, so the motion is to adopt, but that we be more transparent about what's represented in the high injury network. Would that be a fair way to say it, Chris? Is there a second for that motion? Alderman Yazzie, is that a second?
Yes.
Okay, there's a second. Bridget, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, could we perhaps use the word maybe explicit or transparent? Sort of makes it sound like maybe we're trying to hide something, or that the top slab is. And I think, Chris, maybe your point, and you tell me obviously if I'm wrong, but is your point just to make sure that it's more clear versus
see, that transparent means that to me, Bridget, that more transparent to people, that it's more clear that they understand it. But I'm certainly, Chris, I assume that's what you meant by transparent. Yeah. So it doesn't say that to you, Bridget?
No, I think transparent to me makes it sound like there is a not inadvertent neglect of providing key information. But if others don't feel that way, that's fine with me.
Chris, do you want to say transparent and explicit?
I'm fine with that amendment. I think, yeah.
So how about if we use both words, more transparent and explicit about, and then it'll be clear to everybody. How's that sound? Chris, you okay with that? Alderman Yazzie, you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Bridget, does that help? Okay. All right. Okay. Further discussion. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote. Again, remembering that Bill has recused himself. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or wishes a roll call vote. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Thanks, everybody. And Andy, thanks for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you.
Great. And we'll look for some of that follow-up information. Yang and Renee, maybe if you can work with Andy, maybe you can send out an email with some of that follow-up that to some of the questions that were asked.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, thank you, Anne.
Okay.
And also, again, want to thank the Commission, for your guidance and input on this very important matter, and thank you for the support on this. And we'll keep bringing back, different versions of this to the Commission every year. And we look forward to continuing working with you on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's also a representative of the kinds of questions that you may get from other people. So it's always helpful to hear them here as well. Okay, thanks everybody. Next we have item 9, which is our 2022 Public Works Transportation Projects. our normal process is that we like to hear from staff on any item that's on the agenda. And then we like to hear from the public as they have comments. And then we have our discussion and questions from the members of the commission and any alders who may be present. So because we have 4 different projects here that we're talking about, I've asked Joe if I ask the folks who are here to speak, and I understand we have, last I heard, we had 6 people. Is that still right, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is when we get to each project, ask who registered to speak on this particular project. And then, so first we'll hear from staff on Lake Mendota Drive, and then we'll ask who from the public wanted to talk about Lake Mendota Drive. And then we'll have our discussion. Then we'll move on to Hammersley Road, and we'll hear from staff on Hammersley Road, and then we'll ask to hear from the public. And in the past, some of our conversations have gone on for a while, so we've had the public comment at the beginning, and then it doesn't seem nearly as relevant to us as we're going forward. Robbie, did you have a question?
Yes, for process, I'm wondering if instead of us discussing the projects and keeping the public waiting, if they want to comment on one of the later ones. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, see, the problem is that if they all talk up front and give us their thoughts.
But I'm saying what I'm suggesting is that staff presentation on Lake Mendota Drive, public comments on Lake Mendota Drive, staff presentation on next project, public comments on next project, and then we wait for our discussion. I mean, we can ask questions, but maybe not have a discussion on the whole thing until everybody's finished commenting, because then they don't have to wait around for us to do our discussion. I mean, they can if they want to, but
sure, we could do it that way. Alder Furman, did you have a comment on the process?
Yeah, I guess my only complaint would be if there is somebody here for the first project, they're going to have to, and they're interested in what the Transportation Commission thinks, they're going to have to wait for a fairly long time to figure that out. So there is no right solution. I don't know if you folks normally do that works. But that's just at least my thought. If you're going to jump around, is things are going to be kind of disjointed for residents.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time we're trying it this way. So first of all, I believe that, first of all, what I want to do is get the projects that we have people here to speak about up front, so they don't have to hang around. So the way that it looks, we have people here to talk about Lake Mendota Drive and Hammersley Road. So I'm going to ask, is everybody here to talk about either Lake Mendota Drive or Hammersley Road? If so, could you raise your hand and we'll be able to see that? Or let me ask.
Looks like everybody except one has raised their hand. So,
okay, is somebody here to talk about John Nolan Drive or Odana Road?
No, the person that didn't raise their hand, it lives on Hammersley. So I'm assuming they wanted to speak on that.
Okay. Well, let's go with Lake Mendota Drive first, and we'll hear from staff, and then we'll hear from the public on Lake Mendota Drive. Have our discussion, and then we'll move on to Hammersley, because it looks like we'll get both of those in at the beginning, and we'll try it this way and see how it works. And if it doesn't, then we'll switch it up next time. Okay, staff, if you'd like to go on, Chris, I don't know who's here for Lake Mendota Drive.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jim Wolf. Sorry, my video's not on. I'm having some unstable internet tonight, it seems.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time, Jim. So
I will share screen here. I think we're all seeing the little presentation for Lake Mendota Drive, correct?
Yep. Yes.
Excellent. So we currently have planned a series of reconstruction projects on Lake Mendota Drive over the next 3 years. So in 2022, we're proposing to reconstruct the segment between Baker Ave and Epworth Court. 2023 is over on the easterly end then between the City of Medicine, Village of Sherwood Hills limits and Spring Harbor. And 2024 is the middle section between Epworth Court and Spring Harbor. In this area, we've got Spring Harbor Middle School is right in this location, University Avenue, just trying to get bearings here. I've got a lot of text up on the screen with some kind of existing conditions on the street for the majority of Lake Mendota Drive. It is currently a rural cross section with no curb and gutter, no sidewalks, some varying pavement widths from about 28 to up to 34 feet wide or so in those rural sections. Just as we've resurfaced the pavement and things over the years, it's kind of wobbled and varied all over the place. And in a lot of these areas, people have kind of created their own off-street parking areas as well. Some of those are paved, some are just gravel. In some areas, we've got some grade challenges too. So it's pretty unique. And then for a stretch in this middle section, we do have a little bit where it has been improved with curb and gutter. There is some sidewalk immediately adjacent to the middle school, and there's kind of a half a block of sidewalk across the street from it. And in this section, it had been reconstructed to a 36-foot wide street face to face. And then it narrows a little bit here by Spring Harbor. And for the most part, we do have parking allowed on both sides of the street. There is some parking restrictions around the school and through this area where the pavement narrows a little bit for the culvert crossing. I also noted a couple of the steeper portions. There's a high point around Merrill Springs here, 7% grade, and a 5.5% grade coming down towards Spring Harbor. And then up on the westerly end, a 7% grade and 4.5% grade here, kind of in the middle near Epworth Court. I also grabbed a couple of images from out on site just to kind of help give everybody a little bit of context here. So we've got some failing pavement out here. You can see we've got a little bit of topography coming up from the roadway, a number of large canopy trees along the road. Just off the side of the image, you can see one of those kind of off-street parking areas. That one in particular is gravel, and this is on the westerly end between Baker and Laurel Crest. Moving on, we've got the block between Laurel Crest and Capitol Ave. Similar pavement conditions. I kind of see how we've got a lot of large canopy trees. They're set back a little bit from the roadway, but we get that canopy over the roadway and this kind of variable pavement edge. For the block between Epworth and Norman Way, it does widen out in this area a little bit, but we do have a little bit of grade over on this side of the street as well, and marked center line in this stretch too. And then this is that portion that has previously been improved between Norman Way and Spring Harbor. Curb and gutter, 36 feet wide in this area. Here's kind of where we have that short segment of sidewalk on this side, where we have existing sidewalk kind of going around Spring Harbor Middle School. And this is the stretch between Merrill Springs and Spring Court. So we've kind of moved a little bit further to the east beyond Spring Harbor. This is the area of Lake Mendota Drive that gets pretty challenging with the grades. This image on the lower left, it's a little tough to see, but there's a steep driveway here. And then you can see how much it drops off from the roadway edge on the side of the street too, with the driveway, and they've got the garage up on a retaining wall as well. And then a little bit further to the east, so here is that same garage. We've got some pretty large trees right next to the road, and we've got a pretty steep slope up on the, I'll call it the southerly side of the street. So these images are looking to the west. And then here's the easternmost portion. It's tough to see, but you can kind of see there's a little wall that goes along this driveway, and it kind of dives down from the pavement edge. And this driveway is also fairly steep. I think this is at about 15% coming up from the roadway. Wooded area on the right side. You can see some of the off-street parking areas that have kind of been created along with Lake Mendota Drive on this stretch, and some pretty lovely pavement here right in the center. So a little bit of information. I'm actually going to provide an updated slide here. The one that was attached is based on our tube counts for the traffic volumes and speed data. Hopefully I don't lose you. One quick sec. Of course, my Zoom is blocking. Here we go. You still seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to zoom in, hopefully, on some of these. It's not letting me, unfortunately. But on the westerly end, so that we have some parking data in blue, where I'm going to try to bring this in, find another one. Here we go. So we have collected some parking data along Lake Mendota Drive. This was done over weekdays, daytime, evening time, and nighttime. In general, we found that was pretty low utilization, maybe around 10% or so of the available on-street parking out there. The volume and speed data that we've noted here. So this first box is what was attached initially, and we've researched a little bit more data out of Streetlight this afternoon right before the meeting. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get that in there quick enough, but I still wanted that available tonight. On the westerly end, this is the lowest volume area. Our tube counts had about 323 vehicles with average speed 17 miles per hour, 85th percentile, 22. And the streetlight data actually had a fair bit more traffic volume, up to 450, and a fair number of higher speeds out here too. We think this is probably a little bit more consistent with what we've heard from the neighborhood in terms of some of the concerns about speeds out here too. The middle section, we had counted 472 vehicles. The streetlight data had considerably more, up to maybe around 1,400 or so. And similarly, the streetlight data had reported higher speeds in this area too. We had noted about 2.3% over 30 miles per hour. But the streetlight data was looking at closer to 7%. And during the fall, this was the same week that we had collected our speed data. They had about 11% actually. And moving to the southeast here a little bit, the on-street parking utilization was pretty typical all the way through. And as we get into the eastern portion of the project, we do see a little bit higher traffic volumes. We had counted 1,000 to 1,100 or so. We had noted limited vehicles over 30 miles per hour, maybe just under 1%. But similar to what we found in the other segments, the streetlight data actually reported out a little bit higher speeds and traffic volumes. So coming closer to 2,000 vehicles with the percent over 30 miles per hour closer to 10%, and with the number of those vehicles going over 35 or even 40 miles per hour. So I'll hop quick back into the presentation here. So just a quick overview of pedestrians on Lake Mendota Drive. So like I mentioned earlier, there are very limited sidewalks in the area. We have the multi-use path along University Avenue, but in general, everything on the north side here, there are no sidewalks. But south of University Avenue, we do have sidewalks, or all these black lines kind of scattered throughout the neighborhood. And I think you've already heard about a future underpass of the railroad at Old Middleton and Craig. And there is an existing underpass at University Avenue at Spring Harbor right here. And in terms of biking on Lake Mendota Drive, a lot of this slide was based on the tube counts that the city has collected. We are kind of encroaching on a little bit higher traffic volume for that bicycle boulevard context. But currently we do have this ranked as a low stress biking street. The level of traffic stress is rated at a 1 on Lake Mendota Drive. So I think for the most part, folks generally feel pretty comfortable on Lake Mendota Drive, other than that pretty atrocious pavement that's out there right now. So our kind of initial design concepts, and this is why we're coming to the commission tonight, is to get some initial input as we start to put together our preliminary designs. We do think that there is some flexibility to potentially narrow the street a bit. It is pretty variable, and it does seem pretty wide in some areas, especially in locations where there have been some extra paving or street use for some on/off-street parking. And narrowing the street would provide some additional space to hopefully provide sidewalks in this area. The eastern portion, so from about Spring Harbor to the city village limits, is noted in the comprehensive plan as a tier 1 sidewalk need. But with some of the connections that Lake Mendota Drive provides to the school, overall pedestrian network connections, some of the parks in the area too, we think it would be a good idea to propose a project that included sidewalks along Lake Mendota Drive also, to provide that all ages and abilities type pedestrian facility here too. With some of the input we've received from the neighborhood, we would also consider some traffic calming measures to help keep speeds down, especially in light of that streetlight data, where it does indicate that there seems to be a little bit more of a speeding issue out there than the city collected data first.
Jim, did you want to advance your slide? I think you might be talking about the last slide.
I am. Are you seeing it?
We are now. We are now.
I was looking at it on my screen, but apparently it was. And so we do think that with how poor the pavement is out there on some areas, that is probably helping to keep some of the speeds down to a certain extent, that if we reconstruct this street, provide a new paving surface, that we could see some speeds increase a little bit out there potentially. And then I did note already that one concept out here would be to install and extend sidewalks to the extent possible, but noting that we do have some topography challenges in a lot of areas, and we would certainly hope to try to protect a lot of that tree canopy that's out there as well. So, while we do have additional right-of-way space that goes kind of beyond what's out there for the pavement surface on Lake Mendota Drive right now, not all of that would be fully utilized if we are protecting some of those trees and taking into consideration some of the grade issues there as well. I think that is my entire presentation.
So what you're really looking for from the commission, just to clarify, is initial input for these preliminary designs. Is that correct, Jim?
Correct. That we're looking to, we're collecting some input from the neighborhood. We had a public meeting last night. We have put out a survey where we've gotten some input on this. And we'd also like the commission's thoughts as we prepare a preliminary design, especially on the idea of narrowing the street a bit and including sidewalks are kind of the key factors, and get thoughts on what potential traffic calming measures we should really focus on out here as well.
Okay, do we have, Joe, could you ask if we have anyone from the public here to speak on Lake Mendota Drive? If so, we'll hear from them now.
Okay. First up, we have Faith Fitzpatrick, lives on Spring Court in Madison.
Go ahead, Faith. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I think these comments are fitting for this initial design. This is the first time I've attended a Transportation Commission meeting. I wanted to, and I was at the public meeting last night as well. I wanted to give a little context for this stretch of Lake Mendota Drive that has the reconstruction plans in the work. It was not only part of the historic Parks and Pleasures Drive, but it was also the destination point. And we are lucky to still have glimpses of why it was that. This stretch has destinations, it has crossings, and it has conduits. It gets people to the many public spaces that you see, the usage of the lakes. But we also have very close connections to the water benefits and also the unknown consequences of misuse that goes along with that. this is one of the richest connection points in the city between the people, water, and environment, as you probably know, both with stormwater and well 14. This drive has needed repairs for decades. The neighbors know that. We had discussions 20 years ago about worrying about the loss of character and further environmental damage, when the solutions offered were, if we got the street repaired, it would mean incorporation of sidewalks and curbs and gutters. And at that time, the neighborhood opted to leave it as is as long as possible, prioritizing that preservation of the neighborhood character and the environment over the bumpy street. But now in 2022, we seem to have, about 1.5 months to comment towards this holistic initial design plan. And so far last night, what we saw at the public meeting was some of the same limited alternatives that were offered 20 years ago. So the question is can we have better examples of how we can preserve and protect the heritage of this drive, along with our water and the people's well-being? And just to mention, too, people within and outside of this neighborhood travel in large groups along Lake Mendota Drive by bike and walking to get to these destinations. So the solutions to alleviate problems with the vehicles and the cars, especially along that east section, as Jim mentioned there, where the amount of vehicular use really increases, there's the issue there of that being used as a through street. There are also obvious gaps in stormwater management and water quality and how those fit along the drive. And also, I think, of interest to the Transportation Commission across the drive, because there's several places for that. So what is decided by city engineering in the next couple months then will affect the neighborhood and the larger community for the next 75 years. And so I hope that we can have more examples and more context to how we can better help improve and preserve the character, the water quality, the environment, and all forms of the transportation usage along this rich corridor.
Is that 3 minutes, Aiden?
It is, yep.
Okay, can you finish up, Faith, please? Okay, thank you. Does anybody on the commission have questions for Faith? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Faith. I was wondering if you could just speak briefly to characterize how you see walking happening now along this road and how you would see that improved, if at all.
So yeah, as you can see, there's little sidewalks. The sidewalks that are there are disjointed from the parks too, and the school, and mainly through the public spaces. But generally, walking along the road, again, like there tends to be wider type things. People walking side by side. Me personally, I have kids. I've had kids strollers. I have 2 large dogs, and so to characterize how I walk along there is to be in contact with the eye contact with the cars, and not sure how else to describe it. But I guess the other way to just would be that it is a meeting place for neighbors. They typically stop and talk to each other as they're walking, along with you can kind of see points of destination as well. And I live at the bottom of the steep hill too, so I see, and at a curve that in the road that had site limitations in the past. So.
Did you ask how Faith's thoughts about how it could be improved?
Yeah, I guess.
As well?
Yeah, if you could just, I think you kind of said this, but do you see sidewalks as a solution or out of character? I guess is what I'm wondering.
I see the sidewalks as a solution and out of character both. And so I'm hoping that through the back and forth with city engineering, that those zones would be identified, for sure, through Spring Harbor Park. That's a very obvious place for sidewalks or paths. And then as you get to the east section, there's that would be more out of character. It would not fit with how it connects with Lake Mendota Drive, for that matter, either. And if the part of the solution is maybe lowering the speed limit to 20 miles per hour, but also how to limit the through traffic, because it's really, when you look at the speeders, it's the people going through the neighborhood in the rush hours off of University Avenue Drive that are probably the most problematic in terms of, if you wave at somebody and they beep at you and speed up, kind of thing, as opposed to waving and saying, "Oh, hello, good to see you," kind of thing.
Thanks. That was helpful.
Any other questions for Faith? Okay. Thank you. Joe, is there anyone else registered to speak for Lake Mendota Drive?
It doesn't look like it, but if anyone is, please raise your hand. Okay.
Is there a hand raised?
Yep. Susan, you should see a prompt to unmute.
Okay, I'm sorry. I want to talk about Hammersley Road, but I didn't know how to raise my hand, so I was trying out to raise my hand.
Okay. Well,
you did it successfully.
Thank you.
Okay. Well,
and
we'll
please
wait on you then.
Mute your other device too. Next time you speak. Thanks.
Am I okay?
Okay. So no one else to speak on Lake Mendota Drive?
No.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So feedback from the commissioners and other alders who have joined us with initial input for the preliminary designs for Lake Mendota Drive. Alder Furman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think for full disclosure, I do want to note that I am actually a resident that lives on Lake Mendota Drive.
Oh, okay.
As well, I represent the district Lake Mendota Drive is on. It's funny, I could actually I'll send a picture to the commissioners once I'm done, but I took a picture of my lawn today. I am in one of the sections that doesn't have a sidewalk, and you can actually see footprints across my lawn in the snow of people walking across my lawn in the snow to stay out of the street and be safe. I think it's incredibly important that we preserve the trees on Lake Mendota Drive. As Jim pointed out, the tree canopy on Lake Mendota Drive is stunning. It's character defining and really good. I think narrowing the street is a great idea. There certainly is a need for parking on Lake Mendota Drive, and I think there's a way to accommodate at least parking on one side, and through street narrowing. I think we can add sidewalks, which are incredibly important. I've gotten feedback from residents, and it's the typical feedback. I was on Board of Public Works for a while and heard feedback about sidewalks. People don't want to maintain sidewalks. They don't want to have to pay for sidewalks that live on Lake Mendota Drive. But I really don't think that this block should be treated any differently when it comes to putting in safety methods. I had one resident say that actually people walking in the street is a good thing. It calms down traffic. I think that's a horrible way to do traffic control and speed control. I had another resident, when it was pointed out that wheelchair accessibility for sidewalks was important, said that nobody who was in a wheelchair could afford to live in the neighborhood, and therefore we shouldn't worry about that. There's just a lot of obviously very interesting feedback that I'm hearing, but I do think that we need to be smart about how it's done. And I really, having walked the project with Jim and really identified, walk through all the different areas, I'm pretty confident that staff's going to be able to define something that works for the neighborhood and that provides safety. I do actually personally walk the block daily. It's a great COVID habit I got into, walking 4 miles a day, and see there are tons of people. Faith, who is my neighbor a few doors down, is right that people are stopping and talking to each other. There's got to be safe ways to do that, and I think sidewalks going to be an incredibly important addition as long as it's done right. And I have faith that staff will be able to develop something. So I just wanted to share that feedback, and I'm absolutely interested in hearing other feedback from Transportation Commission members on the questions that Jim presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Furman. Other comments or questions? Feedback that we can provide to Jim. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Alder Furman, what you were saying resonated with me. There's obvious opportunities to narrow and traffic calm. It looks like, especially like turning radii and things like that can be corrected. And clearly places where sidewalks can be added, or at least some sort of pedestrian accommodations. It seems like the interesting part to me, as you get towards the west, it really does have this rural nature to it that comes with the trees, obviously, which, losing trees for aesthetic reasons and I think for traffic calming reasons would be no good. And also you have this sort of organic parking arrangement where folks are sort of half on, half off the street that seems to work in a way that you couldn't engineer necessarily. So it would be great to see, like, I mean, I think that there's going to be some really creative solutions here where we can kind of emulate the organic function of the road while improving the safety and design. So I don't know if that was helpful feedback, but that's what I'm seeing as I look at it.
Thanks, Chris. Alder Furman, go ahead.
I apologize for speaking, and I just really wanted to point out something that has always kind of boggled my mind about Lake Mendota Drive that I think was mentioned. The eastbound section, for whatever it's worth, once some lights were added on University, definitely sees a lot more traffic. People think that it's a great idea to cut through Lake Mendota Drive. What's sort of weird about that is it's almost impossible that's a faster way to go. But I think that it's the constant motion that makes people feel like they're actually, getting somewhere faster, even though all they're doing is, driving through a neighborhood and speeding, at times based on the data that we see. So, I think the neighborhood recognizes that, that's probably the portion that sees the most speeding. And so and that a lot of the speeding that doesn't take place around the whole length of Lake Mendota has to do a lot with just the quality of the pavement. So as the pavement is improved, there's definitely a desire for there to be speed calming methods in the neighborhood, especially on that eastbound section, because for some weird reason, people think that's quicker than taking University. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. No problem talking again. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually want to follow up or make a related comment, because I mean, right now, yes, some people do that when University Avenue is congested for whatever random reasons. But I mean, the University Avenue reconstruction is coming up soon, which is going to be a massive project and leading to delays in University Avenue. So this might become an acute problem pretty quickly, where more people might opt for this, and at which point it actually might be faster. Who knows what the construction is going to look like. But I think the speed management part is really important. I mean, I would encourage, and I'm not sure if it's going to be feasible at all, if there's anything to actually prevent through traffic by having turn restrictions, by having good permeability where you can only get through in one direction and not the other. As I said, I'm not totally sure if it's feasible, because I mean, there's only so many intersections where you could do that. But I think that would be worth investigating, or having choke point where, only one car can fit through at a time. So using all of the tools from like the NACDO toolbox for speed managing, and maybe considering some that we traditionally have not done, in addition to speed bumps and traffic circles and that kind of stuff. So I think that would be worth exploring. This piece about sidewalks, I mean, I think absolutely we've heard good arguments for sidewalks, and I don't see any reasons why we should not include sidewalks here for accessibility reasons, for safety reasons. And so whatever is required to do that, I mean, I'm sure we can make it work. And yes, preventing tree loss is important, but by narrowing the roadway, I'm confident that the sidewalks could be put in, and I think that's a really strong value that we have. That's my feedback. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Denise, you're next.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I just really want to emphasize the importance of the sidewalks. They're a really key equity issue. So I want to tie us back to our equity work in the city and on this commission. So sure, there may not be people with known disabilities in this neighborhood now, but any of us are a moment away from disability. So would you want your neighbors to not have access and children in the neighborhood? And so, Alder, I really appreciate you bringing up the ableism and equity issue that you heard from some of your residents, and would really want to see this neighborhood be as welcoming to diversity of people of ages and abilities as any other neighborhood in the city. And I know there's creative minds who can figure out the both and on how to do that and preserve the canopy trees and preserve the energy and the sense of that neighborhood while making it more safe. So thanks for holding that both and.
Thanks, Denise. Robbie, you're next.
Yeah, everybody else has sort of said this, but I'm just going to point out that, disabilities can be temporary and they can be permanent. I had a friend who argued that sidewalks weren't needed on his street until he broke his leg in the middle of the winter and was on crutches on ice. And then he suddenly told me, I get it. I understand now why you need sidewalks. And he was young and fairly strong and was only going to be on crutches temporarily, but he suddenly found himself in a world of hurt trying to get to his house with no sidewalk. And I've been through this with many neighborhoods when I was on the council, and all of us are going to get old and lose our balance or our ability to easily walk on uneven surfaces. We all have friends and relatives who visit who may not be able to use icy or uneven, muddy surfaces. So I think that it's very important that we provide access for everyone, because all of us at some point are going to need it, whether we need it now or not. Thank you.
Other comments? I would also just like to add my support for the importance of sidewalks. I am older and I value sidewalks so much more today as I'm walking around my neighborhood. And as Renee and others know, my neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks everywhere in it. And I feel much more at risk when I'm on that area where there's not a sidewalk. So I think the comments that I've been hearing from the public and from the commissioners seem to support your initial design concepts. Jim, do you have any other comments or questions for the group before we move on?
No, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you again soon with this project.
Okay. We'll save our notes till next time. Thanks, Jim. Okay, so next we have Hammersley Road. So we'll hear from staff on Hammersley Road. Then we'll hear from the public on Hammersley Road, and then we'll have our discussion. So who's going to take that?
I don't think we can hear you, Aaron.
Yeah, whoever thinks they're talking, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Okay, there we go. All right, now we can hear you, Aaron. Okay.
I lost my mic. Can you see my screen as well? Make sure.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Aaron Kenton with City Engineering, and today I'll be presenting on the Hammersley Road resurfacing project. So before we begin, I just want to make a clarifying point that we're bringing this project to this commission preliminarily to get your input on some different alternatives we're looking at. We have not had a public meeting yet. We have one scheduled for early February, and we'll be sending out mailings and project survey for that to get all the public feedback and plan to get the public input and come back to this meeting or come back to this commission. So this is a preliminary look at this project. So getting into it, we're planning to resurface and replace utilities along Hammersley Road west of the Beltline from Brookwood Road to Beltline Frontage Road. This would happen over the next 2 years due to the length and the utility constraints. So the 2022 project will be from Brookwood to Gilbert, and the 2023 project from Gilbert to the Beltline. Now, as mentioned, this is a resurfacing, replacing sanitary storm and water main. Currently, the street has curb and gutter, no sidewalk, and a variety of parking and bike lanes. Typically, with resurfacings, we would just connect missing sections of sidewalk. But because right now there are very little sidewalk on either side of the street along this whole stretch, and in addition, this stretch of Hammersley is noted in the 2018 Madison Comprehensive Plan as having Tier 1 sidewalk need. We were looking at doing something a bit more souped up than a typical resurfacing. And so there's basically two main existing cross sections that we'll go through from Brookwood to Whitney. Look at first on the western end. Here is the existing cross section through here. You could see it's 36 feet from face of curb to face of curb. Traffic, a 2-lane traffic in both directions and parking on both sides, and no sidewalk or any bike facilities over this stretch. I'll also mention that this is a very wooded area, as many of you are aware. Lots of large mature trees directly behind the existing curb, and also lots of pretty steep side slopes. So doing any work constructing sidewalk behind back of curb as we might normally would be very difficult, nearly impossible due to the canopy and the steep side slopes. So with the things we're looking at changing, we're looking at staying within this existing street width of 36 over this stretch. So look at some of the alternatives we've looked at so far. Removing parking on one side of the street and constructing sidewalk. Sidewalk here, due to the width constraints, again, would be directly behind the existing curb line. Additionally, looked at removing parking on both sides over the stretch with parking or with sidewalk, again, directly behind the curb. And although it fits, we do not recommend this either of these cross sections with sidewalk directly behind the curb because it does not leave any terrace space, makes any snow removal, which would be on the onus of the adjacent property owners, extremely difficult, if not impossible. And in addition, I'll mention that the property owners would be assessed for any new sidewalk that's constructed. So with that in mind, we also looked at an alternative where we would remove parking on both sides, bring in the curb line on the north side, this side, and construct an off-street multi-use path that would ideally be 10 feet, but potentially vary between 8 and 10 feet. There would be a small terrace in between the path and the street, but this would be plowed and maintained by the city. So city would be able to plow it, snow removal, even with a narrower terrace. And we would certainly work to keep as wide of a terrace as possible while also minimizing our impacts to the trees and grading on either side. We, after reviewing, believe this is our preferred cross-section due to the fact that there would be no additional assessments for sidewalk. There would still be assessments for utility work and some street infrastructure, but none for sidewalk. The path would be paid for by the city and maintained by the city. So with that, we can also look at the next larger section of Hammersley. This is from Whitney Way to the Beltline. Here's the existing cross-section, a little bit wider here, 40 feet from face of curb to face of curb, two-way traffic, parking only on the north side, and on-street bike lanes, both directions. Little narrower bike lane on the southerly side. Again, large canopy on either side of the street, directly behind the curb, some stretches with steep side slopes. So again, trying to stay within this existing 40 feet width over this stretch. Similarly to the other section, we looked at removing parking and putting in sidewalk directly behind the curb. Similar reasons. Doesn't leave any terrace space for snow removal. And also looked at continuing the path option here, removing both parking and on-street bike lanes, substantially narrowing the street to just two-way car travel, and constructing the off-street multi-use path on the northerly side. With the additional width here, there would be a pretty ample terrace space in between the path and the street, and would still be able to accommodate likely a 10-foot path over this section. So with that, that is the city staff preferred alternative would be to remove all on-street parking and bike lanes over this stretch of Hammersley. Again, happening over the next 2 years with 2 projects, and constructing this off-street multi-use path, which would accommodate pedestrian facilities, which there are none whatsoever. And I can tell you from being out there, I'm sure many of you are aware, a lot of people do walk within the street, either in the parking lane or in the bike lane, because you don't really even have the opportunity to walk behind the curb, given the trees and steep side slopes. So kind of in continuation to the sidewalk conversations from before, definitely a strong need for it. And in addition, this would also accommodate bicyclists throughout this whole stretch, as they're only accommodated from Whitney to the Beltline currently. One thing I did want to point out that would be a tricky, but certainly doable part of installing the multi-use path is figuring out a good crossing at the Whitney Way Hammersley intersection. Currently, it's tricky crossing and only for pedestrians, quite a long way to go, sort of confusing. So that's something we'll have to look at with traffic engineering, and would appreciate any input anyone this commission has on the matter. And lastly, also wanted to look at just some quick speed light data. Actually do have a newer version of this that we just got in, that it just includes some higher speed traffic counts. So here we are showing average daily traffic and average speeds throughout Hammersley, from Brookwood to the Beltline frontage road. And due to the fact that we have average daily speeds above 1,000 to 2,000 vehicles a day, and roughly average daily speeds above 20 miles an hour, it is not recommended by NACTO design guidelines to have unprotected on-street bike lanes. So just furthering a need or push for off-street bicycle facilities, as well as, of course, pedestrian facilities. Also mentioned that existing speed limits on Hammersley west of Whitney is 25 miles an hour, and east of Whitney, from Whitney to the frontage road, is 30 miles an hour. Again, I'll just reiterate that we are coming here preliminarily to get your input, and then are going to the public soon, with a public meeting scheduled for early February, going to public meetings, project survey, get all that good input, and then come back to this commission for more formal approval at a later date. And with that, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. We'll hear from I'm assuming we have several people from the public here to speak about Hammersley.
Yes. First up, we have Nathaniel Dietra, who lives at Stemp Terrace in Madison.
Go ahead, Nathaniel. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say I use Hammersley all the time, nearly every day. I walk it, I jog it, I bike it, and I drive it. And like Aaron mentioned in his presentation, when I'm walking it or biking it or jogging it, if I'm outside of my car, it does not feel particularly safe to use it. So I just wanted to express a lot of support for the multi-use path option. Because I do think I've been thinking about it for several years. I've lived at this address for I guess maybe 8 years now. So I've been thinking about it shortly after I moved in, that something needs to be done there. And I've always thought a multi-use path would be great. One thing, I don't know that I heard it from Aaron in the presentation, but I think this is a strong point in support of the multi-use path. On the right-hand side, or that's not the right way to say it, the eastern side of the stretch of Hammersley that we're talking about, it connects up to the southwest commuter path. And that is a really good multi-use path that tons of people use that connects up with the Capitol Loop and other important multi-use paths in the area. So having a multi-use path that connects to Southwest commuter, I think, is really valuable because it'll connect folks along this corridor to have like a low stress way to get onto that path. And then from there, you can get to just so many places in town. So that's all. I'll be done now.
Okay, thank you, Nathaniel. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for Nathaniel? Oops, hang on. My screen here. Any of the commissioners have any questions for Nathaniel? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands.
Next up, we have Matthew Mendota, who lives on Hammersley Road.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. Privileged to speak before you. My name is Matthew Mendonça. My wife Shelley and I recently purchased a home on the north side of Hammersley Road, west of Whitney Way. As retirees, we viewed this neighborhood as the culmination of our housing aspirations: modest homes, established lots, and importantly, no sidewalks to maintain. Now the city, without consultation of the residents and with public bids looming on the horizon, wishes to impose dramatic changes to the character of the neighborhood in the form of reduced parking, bike lanes, and sidewalks. This is proposed as the Hammersley Road Resurfacing Project, a name which belies its true intention, which is to alter the character of a long-established neighborhood by mandating sidewalks and bike lanes. The city's proposal subjects homeowners to probable tax increases, yet exposes them to potential reduction in property values as properties are encroached upon and the neighborhood's charm is eroded. Additionally, the proposal suggests that those residents on the north side of the road may bear a disproportionate amount of this burden. Furthermore, this proposal amounts to an unfunded mandate imposed by the city on those homeowners who may have to maintain the sidewalks at their expense in perpetuity. To date, there has been no discussion of issues, no dialogue with residents, unlike the Lake Mendota Drive project. Nothing from the city which even defines a problem needing to be solved. And yet we're told that public contracting bids are scheduled for March, with construction scheduled for summer 2022. I strongly condemn the lack of public outreach and community involvement for this project. I and others are livid at this proposal, and I speak tonight in opposition to the Hammersley Road Resurfacing project. I appeal to you to maintain the character of these established neighborhoods. I would like to add that I wonder how excited others might be who actually don't own a property on Hammersley. If this proposal was in literally their front yard, as it is ours. I'd also like to add that and I'll speak for myself and not the others, but I think a lot of this could go away with a good dialogue with the community, and perhaps speed bumps if you're concerned about speed, and a bike lane. But I think I draw the line at sidewalks. Given what I've heard this evening from others, that may be an uphill battle, but I wanted to speak to you as somebody who has a vested interest in maintaining the character of this well-established neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for Matthew? I'm seeing a hand. Where's the hand? Oh, there you are. Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
Thank you. Of the last speaker, Matthew. Could you say more about the lack of community input, conversation, notification? Could you expand on that, please?
Certainly. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Thank you, Alder. Yeah, I mean, to date, as a homeowner, I've not been reached out to by anybody. There's been zero public intercourse on this, and yet I got a indication that public bids are scheduled for March for public construction bids, and clearly you're aiming to do this in 2022. So you've got a schedule, and no one's talked to us about this yet. So I don't know what else to tell you. That there's just been no outreach by the city, no discussion about how to maintain the character of the neighborhood and walk perhaps successfully into the 21st century. I hope that answers your question.
Aaron, I believe that you do have something scheduled. Is that correct?
Yep, I can respond to that. I apologize for any confusion that we've caused in some of the order of this, but we are absolutely intending to do a full slew of public engagement, planning to send out a mailing for a public meeting notice that will be held at the beginning of February, as well as a project survey that you can fill out and provide input on all facets of the project. The purpose of this presentation to this commission was to kind of gain early preliminary feedback from the commission to see if we wanted to do something beyond a typical resurfacing project where we would more get in, get out, replace utilities and street infrastructure as needed. But given the sidewalk need and the lack of facilities, we were looking at doing something additional and wanted the commission's feedback before we went to the public with proposals. But I apologize for any confusion that is created, but there is certainly going to be the typical and extensive public process with this project as with any others.
And then it'll come back to TC, correct, Aaron?
And then it'll come back, yes, to TC for a formal approval once the public has weighed in.
Thank you for that clarification. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have anything further?
No, thank you very much for that response. That clears it up, that there will be an opportunity for the community members to have input. And so there's no decision already made, and you'll incorporate what can be incorporated, but this will come back to our body for a final vote. So yes, that answers my question. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Joe, who would be next for Hammersley?
Susan Bland, who also lives on Hammersley Road.
Go ahead, Susan. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, I've lived on Hammersley Road for more than 20 years, and I have walked Hammersley Road twice a day, every day, with my dogs. And it is kind of unsafe. I agree with the multi-use lane on the street, because I understand from what Aaron says that it's going to be just abut where the curb is now. Is that correct? And so it won't take down the trees or anything that's beautiful on our street. We did try a traffic calming measure, which was the islands, which I was in favor of, and they could have worked, except what happened was there was parking, and so cars would park in that lane, and then also the walking lane did not go where the islands were. So there was just like a crunch where the islands were, where people were supposed to walk. Cars couldn't park there. people were supposed to walk and the traffic, and that's really dangerous. So I would support no parking on the street because people have huge driveways. So you don't really need to park on the street. And the multi-use lane, which would be a really good idea. And I don't know why you chose the north side of the street to do this, because there's just all those big, downturns of the land. And I do agree with Matthew, who said, the assessments for the sidewalks, because the lots are so big on this street, it would just be horrible to think about it. And shoveling, because I'm an old lady and I can barely shovel my driveway. Having to shovel a double lot would really be hard for me. That's my self-interest. So I support the multi-use lane, the no parking, and not taking down any trees to do any of this work. That would be my preference as a homeowner on Hammersley Road. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Susan. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for Susan? Okay, seeing no hands. Joe, who would be next for Hammersley?
We have one other person wishing to speak, Alex Thompson. I'm not sure if he wants to speak on this one or not, but I will unmute him.
Yeah, can you
Alex,
hear
me? Are you here to talk about Hammersley?
I am.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So I live on Jacobs Way, which is a bit further down on Hammersley, just about on the edge of the map within the PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to voice my support for the multi-use path along the north side of Hammersley between Brookwood and Gilbert. And I also want to voice my support for making the path maximum proposed width of 10 feet. I think anything less than that kind of puts cyclists and pedestrians in an awkward position where you kind of have to negotiate and, you run the risk of bumping into each other. The lack of pedestrian and bike infrastructure in the east-west streets between Hempstead and Russet has really always surprised me. If you look at a map and if you look at like the open streets map, you can see essentially every road between those two roads has no sidewalk, essentially cutting off the neighborhood to the west from the neighborhood to the east. I think this plan is a great solution to connect the two neighborhoods. My kids have friends that live in like the Teresa Terrace and Hammersley neighborhood that attend Toki Middle School, and they really have zero options for a low stress route to school. There's no bike path, there's no sidewalk, there's no good crossing of Whitney Way, and all of that kind of puts them in a situation where they have to take the bus, which is really only, if they were to walk it, it's less than a mile. Essentially, we're asking these vulnerable road users, like these kids, to bear the responsibility of finding a safe route to walk or bike. And I think we should be providing one to them instead. This section of Hammersley has essentially remained untouched since the early 1960s. If you look at any historical map of this street, and even if you look at the street today, the corner of Hammersley has unfinished sections of sidewalk. And so you can kind of tell the intent was to connect or create some sort of sidewalk on the north side of Hammersley, but it just was never done for one reason or another. I hope we take advantage of this opportunity to make an investment in bicycle and pedestrian transportation. And I hope we select the alternative with that 10-foot multi-use path. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for Alex? Okay, seeing no hands. Who has comments? Are those all of the speakers then, Joe?
We have a Christopher Hubeck who registered as not wishing to speak, but is now raising his hand. So I'll leave that up to the commission if they would.
I'm fine. I'm fine with that. If there's no objection from anyone on the commission, I'm happy to let him speak. Anybody object? Christopher, are you here to talk about Hammersley Road, I assume?
Christopher, you are unmuted. Christopher?
Christopher, are you here to talk about Hammersley Road? We can't hear you.
Must be something on his end. Do you have a mic that's muted? Okay, guess not. All right, that's all the people we have registered to speak. I can go through and list the other people.
Okay, that would be helpful.
We had Susan Hill, District 10 on Annan Lane, registered neither in support or opposition, wishing to speak, but Susan Hill's not here. John David Jelinski, District 10, Lewin Drive, in opposition, not wishing to speak. Jesse Snellman, District 19, Tai Chopra Road, in support, not wishing to speak. Christopher Hubeck, who we couldn't get unmuted, District 10, Whitcomb Drive, in support, not wishing to speak. And Gina Hall, District 20, Hammersley Road, in opposition, not wishing to speak. And that's it.
Okay, Joe, let's just ask Christopher one more time if he wants to try and talk, if he can get unmuted.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize for that.
And you're here to talk about Hammersley Road?
I am, and I just wanted to respond to one of the previous commenters. I am a homeowner on the north side of Hammersley, between Whitney Way and the Beltline, and would gladly pay the assessment to have sidewalks and a multi-use path. This is the best improvement that I've been hoping for years. This stretch of road, my daughters, I feel unsafe letting them walk or ride their bikes to school. They go to Orchard Ridge and Toki Middle School, and there's really no other alternative to get there. We use it daily to walk, ride our bikes, and it's not safe. Regularly see cars driving well in excess of 40 miles an hour. They use the current bike lane. It's a passing lane. This is an improvement that would make this neighborhood eminently more livable. So glad to pay the assessment. Please put a sidewalk, put a bike path wherever it needs to go. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Christopher. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for Christopher? I thought I saw a hand go up and then come back down again. Does anybody on the commission have a question for Christopher? Okay, thanks, everybody. So then we're done with anybody who's there to speak, Joe?
Yes.
Thank you so much for helping us do it that way. Okay, so let's hear comments or questions on Hammersley Road from the commission. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. I can't tell you how long I've looked forward to this project. I think I've lived in this neighborhood for almost 40 years, and Hammersley Road has been crying for attention for that length of time. And I think I really appreciate the work that engineering has done, and specifically regarding what Aaron had presented this evening regarding the multi-use path. I think it resolves many of the concerns that many of the neighbors had regarding, yes, these are huge lots, and the assessments, if the residents had to pay for the sidewalk, and that would be a burden probably. But because of, I think the solution that the city has come up with is, as far as the multi-use path to to accommodate the bicycles as well as the sidewalk in that 10-foot corridor. And I really think the 10-foot is if that's all possible, I think that'd be highly desirable. I think this is a tremendous improvement. This stretch of the whole corridor is straight, as you can see on the map, and it is wide, and it is looking for traffic calming, and other types of traffic calming are just not appropriate. And I think the narrowing of the street is well justified. I think the with the city indicating that because of the city, the multi-use path, that they will be responsible for the maintenance. That will go a long ways in addressing some of the concerns by some of the residents who have lived there for their long time and are concerned about the amount of snow that they'd have to shovel. And I normally even if it was just sidewalk, I think it would still be warranted. But regardless, I think having the city coming up out front with the maintenance of the multi-use path, I think that will help a lot, as well as the assessments will not be for sidewalk or for the path. So I think that will go a long ways in helping a lot of the neighbors. I think the concerns about traffic calming is one of the huge things on my plate, and this project I think is narrowing. It makes all the sense in the world because it's not needed for the volume of traffic. It's just a place where people can speed, and so I think this will help a lot. I think I would like to disagree with one of the presenters or one of the neighbors saying that they think their property values will go down. I think it's going to be reverse. I think with the connection to the southwest path, the sidewalk and the bicycle path, I think that will make these extremely valuable, desirable homes because of the size of the lots and I think giving up the parking is not. I think two of the speakers mentioned that these people typically have large driveways. So parking is, if you look at any of the data, is very, very minimal parking on Hammersley. So I really want to. I guess maybe I want to address one of the questions, one of the comments that one of the speakers residents had about the not enough time to address. And I communicated with our neighborhood president over the weekend, and he had that same concern. And I told him, this is, some of the ways that the Transportation Commission works of sometimes we get the projects that comes to us after the city has got a pretty much preferred alternative that they presented to the neighbors. And then what the Transportation Commission members get a chance to comment and would like to make changes. And it kind of disrupts, difficult for the staff as well as the neighbors to understand what the commission concerns are. So I think the way we're doing this project is the correct way. And that is that the city engineering is coming to us first with some preliminary ideas, and that they can take then our comments from the commission back to the neighborhood, so that they have some a preferred alternative both from the city as well as the Transportation Commission as far as the big picture things. And I like that. And then it comes back to us for one more shot after they get a chance to fine tune it, if you will. And I think certainly the crossing at Whitney Way will be a challenge for the multi-use path, but I would look forward to seeing, and I don't have any necessarily ideas on how that'll look like, but I know that's going to be a concern, and maybe some of the other commission members have some ideas for that crossing. But I think that I think this project is the way that engineering and the commission should work, and give our preliminary information sometimes maybe the neighbors feel it's being jammed down too fast, but I think rather we're getting comments now, but they'll also have opportunities for more in-depth discussions at the neighborhood meetings when the city goes forward with those. So overall, I just applaud the city for this project, and I'm just thankful that it's going to happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Chris, you're next.
Thank you. So I guess as we've heard, I think this multi-use path option looks great. So I'll just flag, I guess, a couple things that I'd be looking for. One that Bill mentioned is the crossing at Whitney Way. I'm concerned about, bikes coming from a direction that like a turning driver wouldn't expect. So I think we will probably need to see a couple options of how to make that work. One that comes to mind might be to move the crossing north a little bit away from the intersection. I'm not sure what the pros and cons would be without seeing it drawn out, but one idea that comes to mind. And then the other downside, I think, to the multi-use path on one side, from my perspective, would be that folks are going to be accessing, there's a lot of houses here, so folks are going to be accessing the path along the route, including from the south side. So if there are ways to make that less awkward, I don't know if there's precedent for some sort of curb cut where there's a driveway on the south side. That would be great to see. But other than that, thanks for the work.
Before you go, were you in favor of a 10-foot multi-use path versus 8?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Great.
I guess I'm sort of indifferent, but yeah, they both look great.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Denise, you're next. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Dan. First, I just really want to commend Aaron and city engineering. This is a really creative idea. Having been in that neighborhood to visit folks, it's a gorgeous neighborhood. And so the multi-use path still kind of feels like it also has the vibe of the neighborhood. Really commendable. And then not putting a burden on the homeowners for both snow removal and cost. So very, very excellent win-win. I highly recommend the 10-foot as well. As somebody who uses multi-use paths with a white cane on foot, it is really nice to kind of have a sense of where I can go versus bikes, and it just helps reduce some of my anxiety about multi-use pathways. So I definitely suggest that. And I am concerned about safe crossing, especially for more vulnerable users at Whitney Way. So be curious to hear some solutions for that. I don't know if a flashing beacon. I don't have a lot of ideas there, but it is a concern. And then the last thing that I am curious about, and maybe something to solicit the neighborhood particularly, is if there's a preference for north or south and what those preferences would be. And Bill, I wanted to call out that I really appreciate you noting this process. I liked it for the Lake Mendota one we just did, and then this one where we're hearing about a complex project on the front end and able to offer perspective as you go in and do the neighborhood work and then the further refining. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm excited to see how this rolls out.
Thank you, Denise. Alder Figueroa Cole, go ahead.
Thank you. So I am the alder for this part of this project for District 10, and I actually thank you, Bill, for sharing your perspective on that discussion that you have with the Neighborhood Association, since it kind of threw me off a little bit for a loop there with the feedback received on that regard. So I am glad that I am in total agreement with you on your statement. So I don't have much more to add to it. And with the things that the people that have spoken before me has presented, I mean, I think it's a very creative way to tackle this road. I have been out there for a very short time, and Hammersley is one area that is a constant issue, especially with the safety of the street, with the speeding of the street. I actually texted Jason at the Midtown District, and I want to make sure that MPD is aware of this project, and they can have any input or comments on this regard. But I think they will also their feedback will also be valuable, because it's a road that we are constantly back and forth trying to figure out how to make it safer. I also want to point out that moving forward with this project and with the prior project that you guys were discussing, is just it sends a signal to the community that we are indeed 100% in support of the initiatives of Safe Streets and Vision Zero. I get that this is a project that is started with the need for the utility updates, but I am so pleased to see that staff is really taking the opportunity to expand that, to have a cohesive plan, and to work in a collaborative effort to make sure that the vision of those other projects are also part of these particular projects. So I'm very, very pleased with this. Looking forward to the community meetings. There's one already. We discussed one for February. So thank you, Aaron, for reaching out, and thank you for the presentation. I don't have any input in a particular design or this and that. I'm going to leave that to you guys, the experts. But I am pleased with what I heard so far from you guys and most of the members of the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Harold, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Lots of good things that have already been said, so I'll try to not repeat too many things. Regarding 10-foot versus 8 versus something else, I mean, 10-foot is obviously preferable, but as far as I understood the presentation, there might be trade-off with the width of the terrace and therefore snow storage. So 2 feet terrace space is not a whole lot to store snow in the winter. So I think considering that trade-off, is it more important to have the path wider, or do we need to add a little bit to the terrace there to make it sure it is accessible year-round and the snow from the road doesn't get pushed onto the path and then getting icy and all that? So that is just something to consider. But yeah, I mean, 8 feet, I think, is like the minimum width recommended for two-way cycle tracks, and this is a multi-use path. So I mean, 10 feet is certainly preferable. Making sure that all of the crossings with the driveways, I think we got one written public comment that pointed out, there are a lot of driveways. Fortunately, they're residential driveways, so they're probably not going to have as much volume as for some more commercial usage. But when you design the paths, making sure that the path is level and the driveways drop down or up to make clear this is a two-way cycle track. You need to stop before you cross it. I think that's really important to avoid potential conflicts there. The crossing with Whitney Way, I just looked it up on the High Injury Network map because we now have that. I mean, that seems to be, there is an injury crash or somebody biking. This is part of the High Injury Network, both on Whitney Way and the intersection itself. So I think it's worth definitely exploring, not just for the benefit of the multi-use path going through, but also, we already have restricted turns here, but who knows, maybe that makes it actually more difficult here. It's a very wide roadway. So I think figuring out what we can do here, both to improve the multi-path crossing, but maybe also generally getting some safety upgrades integrated with the project. Then on the western end, is there any vision for going farther west? Is the idea and this maybe ties into the question like north side versus south side, is there any potential in future projects to extend the path? I think in terms of the bike network, you can think about, you can turn right on Blackwood and get over there. But eventually, it would be great if there were one continuous path getting you all the way to McKenna and Albert Park in one go. So I'm curious if there's any plan or thought for extending that in the future. And would it be easier to do that on the north and south? And I think, and one final one. So the city, is there a city policy that if it's multi-use path, the city is responsible for maintaining that? Because on the one hand, it seems great in order to diffuse neighborhood opposition because people don't want to pay for it. But I also want to make sure that that's handled consistently on all facilities across the city in order to have that equitable.
Can you answer that?
Yeah, I can answer that. First off, in regards to your question about extending some sort of an off-street multi-use path beyond the Brookwood western limits to Belver Park, McKenna Boulevard, definitely something that we've talked about and we'll look at when setting up this design and making sure that we set ourselves up as best we can for something extending west in the future. At this time, I'm not aware of any specific plans to make that extension, but we'll certainly consider it. And I think it would be super well served, and especially if this path were to go in, it would maybe make that come a little faster too. Regarding the policy question, I would resort to maybe Christy Bachman if she's on the call. I just want to make sure I get it right. I'm not sure if Christy is here.
Yeah, Christy's here. Do you know the answer to that, Christy?
Could you restate the question for me, please?
Yeah, so it seems like the idea is that if a multi-use path or whatever we call it here goes in there, the city would be maintaining it. And so I'm wondering, what is the policy? When does a property owner need to maintain a sidewalk or widen sidewalk or multi-use path versus the city?
So we only have a handful of multi-use paths that are, adjacent to the roadway in the normal spot of a sidewalk. And in all those instances, the city maintains them. Offhand, I'm thinking University Avenue, Johnson Street, and what's proposed here. So whenever it's a multi-use path, usually they're 10 feet wide and asphalt, the city goes ahead and pays for the installation and also maintains and removes the snow during the winter time. Sidewalks are the responsibility of adjacent property owner to remove snow and of course, if it's a city frontage like a park or a storm sewer parcel, we take care of those.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments from the commission or other alders who are here? Aaron, do you have what you need?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been really fantastic feedback, and I look forward to taking this back to the drawing board and then presenting to the public, get that feedback and bring it back to you all. Thank you.
And we appreciate you coming before us twice. Once to hear from us on a preliminary basis and give us an opportunity to offer that feedback. And it also gives the public an extra opportunity for feedback as well. So thank you very much, Aaron. So next we have John Nolan Drive. Can I just check in with you, Joe and Aiden? So we've had all of the members of the public had an opportunity to speak, so we have nobody else waiting, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So next we have John Nolan Drive. So who's going to handle that from staff?
I can handle that one. This is Chris Pedikowski with City Engineering, and I'm going to share my screen here. All right, is everyone seeing that?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So we're continuing the theme here of coming to you early with the project. There's no decisions to make on John Nolan Drive yet. This is a quite a longer term project than the two before you. But just wanted to kind of introduce it and get folks' initial thoughts. And we did have one public information meeting and wanted to go through some of the results that we heard at the meeting. So John Nolan Drive reconstruction is a very big project for the city. We just kind of kicked it off last year, and we did, as I mentioned, we've been meeting with the design team for about a half a year or so, and as I mentioned, did have a public information meeting in October. Our project team, we have KL Engineering, MSA, Urban Assets, and Equity by Design as our consultants. We're also developing the project with Wisconsin Department of Transportation, as it was selected as a project to receive federal funding for construction. So John Nolan Drive today, it's kind of a gateway, iconic entrance to downtown. I think a lot of people are familiar with the causeway and the great views you can get from the causeway. We have right now there's it's between 4 and 6 lanes depending on what stretch of the street you're on. We have 6 bridges out there, so there's you can kind of see them here in the picture. There's 2 sets of bridges in each location, one northbound and one southbound bridge here, and here. So there's 6 altogether, and we also have our Capital City Trail, along the causeway. Very, very popular, well-used path. One of the highest used in the state. We have the Lake Mendota shoreline, and also Wisconsin and Southern Railroad has 2 different tracks along the eastern edge of our roadway. Just a little bit of planning context for the project. The downtown plan touched a little bit on John Nolan Drive and including recommendations about improving the streetscape and kind of beautifying the approach to the downtown. So we'll definitely be taking those plan recommendations into account with the project. As far as project needs and why we're doing this, there's a number of reasons. One of which is pavement condition. As with most street projects, the reason we kind of get them on the list is because the pavement is starting to get a little rough. That is true on John Nolan Drive. Although I would say it's probably not the highest driver. The bridges are actually our highest driver of the project. And the bridges are at a point in their lives where we need to plan for the reconstruction of them. They've the southbound ones are about 60 years old, and the northbound ones are about 50 years old now. And they're showing a little bit wear. The bridge decks. You can see here the joints on the bridges are constant maintenance issues for us to go out there and repair as these plates come loose. You can see some of the concrete's falling away on some of the girders. One of the biggest things going on out there is some of the movement that happens with the way the bridge was built adjacent to the railroad. It was built after the railroad. The railroad was there first. The railroad causeway. So it was an additional set of fill on top of a slope, and things have moved and shifted out there over the years, and that you can see in this case that these girders used to be on the middle of their piers, and now you can see they are not. So in fact, we had to install a bracket on this one to make sure that the girders are still supported well. So things are moving horizontally out there. There is a lot of has been a lot of settlement as well, so vertical movement, but that has started to slow down, and not as much of an issue. But the horizontal movement is still an issue for us. Shoreline protection. While we were out there, we planned to repair the shoreline as well. And I didn't mention before, I think on these pavement conditions, you can see one of the big things with our multi-use path is on the bridges, the constriction here, where the multi-use path shrinks down to 8 feet from wall to railing here. So it's really a tight cross section there, and as we mentioned before, it's so highly used, so we know that needs to be wider. We'll be looking at safety and crash issues. It does exist on the high injury network, so we'll be looking at different ways to improve upon that, and also look at crossing, improving crossings, and try to lower speeds, create more of an urban street environment versus the highway kind of feel. Some of the goals out there. I mentioned some of these already a little bit, the project challenges. We have the causeway movement and settling. We are working together with Madison Parks Department, who is undergoing a lakefront master plan for that encompasses this area. So we'll be working together on that. Also, as usual stuff, working with Madison Metro, looking at our stormwater quality and any abilities to do any improvements there. Coordination with the railroad, coordinating with the parks and public space. Construction staging and traffic control will be a big issue out here. There's 45,000 cars a day, I think, that we're working with. So this is a big issue. And project funding is a challenge as well. If the project is big with that many bridges and structures, it's difficult to fund. So what are we doing? We're going to be doing a full reconstruction of the street, including improvements to the roadway, bridges, intersections, multi-use path, and shoreline protection. The limits right now, as we speak, are from North Shore Drive down to Olin Avenue. And this is these are the portions of the street that are under city ownership. To the north is 151. So we would be working with the state on any improvements there. And then to the south is county highway controlled. So we'd have to work with the county on that. The stretch in red is the portion the city does control on its own. We have established some of these goals here. So increasing safety for users, improve mobility environment, obviously replace the aging infrastructure, improve public lakefront accessibility, and improve water quality to the extent possible. Right now, as I mentioned, we're very early on in the process. We expect a multi-year development of the project, and then construction in 26 and 27. So these first years we'll be kind of working with community engagement planning, and also working with the Parks Department and their master plan to kind of coordinate any activities there, and then getting more into selection of preferred alternatives and final design in the later years. So as far as public engagement, we are trying a little bit more of a robust process than even normal. So even more than our normal process, which I consider is pretty robust on its own. But trying to look at a number of different ways to get input besides just our typical PIMs, and try to gather community input from a bunch of diverse perspectives. Some of the things we've done so far, a project flyer, project website. We've had some tabling at community events, so actually going out into events and talking to folks. We did do a SurveyMonkey online survey to get inputs. We've been working on the different language flyers, and of course we've got our email system and website. So some of the things we've heard at the public information meetings so far, we did have one meeting so far. Some of the things they valued most was the water, obviously, commuting. It's obviously a very convenient commuting route. All the multi-use path, people love, obviously, for good reason. Some of the concerns we heard is high traffic, different users and speeds, safety issues, and there's quite a few themes that kind of we hear over and over again. One of them is speed and separation of bikes and peds and cars. So trying to get more space between the different modes of travel. Reducing traffic noise was a common thing we heard. Expanding green space. We have asked folks how did COVID impact how they use the streets, and obviously, and at the beginning there we had a lot less cars, more bikes. It was very quiet at the beginning, but I think that's starting to ramp up a bit. So on the survey, so that was some higher level feedback from the PIM. From the survey, the online survey, we had almost 2,000 responses, 1,800. The majority of the folks use it more than once a week. Automobile is primary mode, particularly for the Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Some of the goals that they valued the most was increasing safety, replacing aging infrastructure. Improvements should be people-centered versus automobile-centered. So again, kind of trying to kind of focus on that, more like a ped bike perspective than throughput, car throughput. Some of the open-ended questions we asked folks about, some of the common things we're hearing again, widen the multi-use path, separate the pedestrians and bikes, intersection and crossing improvements, as we mentioned, physical changes like barriers or speed limit reductions, fix the pavement, again, increase the width and separate peds and bikes. Those are separate peds and bikes, I think, are something I've heard the most in this process. As far as the shoreline, kind of looking at ideas to try to get more access. So right now, there's a multi-use path, and then there's kind of a rock barrier. So maybe there's some other ways where we can provide better access down to the water. Some seating, perhaps, along the stretch. Just some survey demographics. I can won't get into too detail, but this information is available in the handout and on the website. Tabling and intercept. So one thing we did here is to try to get out into the community and meet intercept folks at their events versus expecting people to come to our meetings. So the group went out to a bunch of different events and had a table up with flyers and talked with folks about what they valued about the project or what projects or challenges they saw. And we heard a lot of similar things. Fix the pavement, slow the speeds, provide barriers, increase the width of the multi-use path, again, separation, fix the pavement. For shoreline stuff, we're looking at seeding, more green space, and some facilities, maybe docks or fishing spots. That's another thing we've heard. There's a lot of folks fishing up by the Monona Terrace. There's not many great spots along the causeway to do that. We also, our team, members of the team visited a Latino professionals event to try to get some views from them. Some of the things they valued, beautiful views, a nice throughway, great transportation alternative for all users. The bike paths. Some of the concerns, the peripheralization of marginalized groups. This was traffic stalls too much, so that's some folks are concerned about the backups, traffic drives too fast. Looking at maybe some more beautification for pedestrians, speed limit enforcement, and waterfront restaurants was one of the things they were interested in. I think this is my last slide, but again, I mentioned the Parks Department is working on their Lake Monona waterfront master plan, and we did have part of our team that's working on our public engagement process are also working for the Parks Department on that. So they've been able to kind of carry over some of the issues they've heard, and a lot of it's similar stuff again: wider bike path, space for passive recreation, reduce conflict between competing path users. So a lot of the similar things. That's all the presentation I had. Again, we're here early, and wanted to, provide this overview of the project. See if there's anything, let you know some of the things that I've been hearing already. Wondering if there's things that you guys want us to keep in mind as we start to move forward and develop some alternatives to look at. And that's all I had for presentation.
Okay, Robbie, you're first. Go ahead.
Thank you. So partly I just had some clarifying questions. One, you brought up that you've got Highway 151 from North Shore Drive to Blair, the county from Olin to the Beltline. How are you coordinating with them? Because I think that it's going to be really important in order for John Nolan Drive to function, to have all of those jurisdictions have some agreement on how it should function. For instance, I'm just going to say, I think there should be a consistent speed limit. Once you get off the Beltline, or once you're headed towards the Beltline, I think the speed limit changes like 3 or 4 times. And I think that it would be great to have a consistent speed limit, preferably slower. but I know that requires coordination with the state and the county. And so I'm asking, what have been your discussions about the sections that are not indicated by the red line? So that's my first question.
Sure. As I mentioned, WISCOT's a partner on the project, so they will be working with us along, even though the red line is a city street. Since we're using the federal funding, we work through WISCOT to use those funds. So in that respect, they would be along the whole process. We could, up to date, we haven't talked to the county about the stretch to the south, but we could certainly do that. That's a good point. I think we've talked ourselves on the team about wanting to provide that consistent speed limit as well. So, that was, it actually changes within our limits.
Yeah.
So we want to really focus on that and get something consistent and slower. One of the other points is the pavement. The pavement's a little better on those stretches. I won't say a ton better, but it's we have a little more time on those two stretches to coordinate those. So, but it's a good point that we need to take that bigger picture view.
Yeah, and I guess on another point that it might go outside the project boundaries, it sounds like there's going to be quite a bit of redevelopment, both at the Olin, John Nolan area, and also at the Coliseum Alliance Center. And I think that we need to keep in mind that people need to move across this roadway and not just along it. So again, we need to talk to our partners about getting across John Nolan Drive, especially the part between Olin and the Beltline, so that people can move from the path and the lake and the hotels that are on one side to the apartments and hotels and entertainment district and restaurants that are on the other side. And I think that I just don't want you to forget that we need to cross it. You heard that from some of the people in the surveys, when they said, crossing or access to the path. I think that's what they were talking about, that it's really hard to cross it. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that will definitely be a primary focus of the project. And some of you are probably aware that before this project, we had a kind of a corridor study that from Blair Street to this area that included some options in this area. And I didn't mention that, but that is included in the scope of the consultants. So there was an alternative to in that corridor study to create an underpass for peds and bikes just north of North Shore Drive, and that is in the consultant scope to do a feasibility study for, as well as some other alternatives, just to improve those crossings and there and Lakeside and Olin. So those will be things that we spend a lot of time on.
Okay. And I know that it's not part of this project, but like Rimrock as well. I mean, that's the other place you can cross, and it's pretty bad for anybody not in a car. So I guess my other question was, I'm assuming that if you're rebuilding the causeway and the roadway, you can move the curbs, the allocation of public space, how many lanes or what they look like, that kind of thing. That's all that's on the table, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Because I think that if we want to make it a more urban roadway, we might want to make it, as you mentioned, look less like a highway. And so I think I've covered everything that I wanted to point out. Just don't forget about crossing and, slow it down and work with the partners. So thank you.
Bridget, you're next. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Chris. I am wondering, I know the bridges are and have been a major concern. With new bridges there, will whatever technology you guys use, is that likely to take care of all of those issues? I guess the expansion joints, the noise and also the way they interact with the path, as well as I'm sure just the movement obviously has been problematic for a while. So I guess I'm wondering, with new technology and however you guys are going to reinstall those bridges, will there still be those kind of metal plate expansion joints, do you think, or is there some other technology that can take that place?
Well, those particular metal joints were they served their purpose because the bridge they anticipated that movement of that bridge, and those types of joints allowed for that. So that obviously that'll be another piece that we spend a lot of time on. We're going to want to, if we spend the money to replace the bridges, we want to make sure that with the newer technologies, we can get down to drive the piles down further to get down to more solid bedrock, and but we're still, I still want to. It won't be that kind of joint, but we're still going to have to, provide for some movement. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just hopefully it's something that is a little bit easier to deal with. I'm surprised the metal plates don't get terribly slippery on the path, but this time of year they are a little bit problematic out there when it's particularly cold out. Just a little bit slick. And I'm also wondering, I guess, encouraging you guys to look really closely at water management on the path. I don't know what the plans are there, but obviously it's a big issue now, and it constrains even further that limited area, particularly on the bridges. With between the standing water and where the ice and snow can't be removed from the path. So I guess, hopefully there's something that can be done there. And I'll just put in a plug for not increasing the lighting in that area. I really enjoy the level of lighting that exists now, particularly at night when I'm using the path most of the time. The lighting from the roadway is definitely sufficient. And I also hope that you keep a natural surface path option. I know that might not be feasible given the constrained width that you guys have there and the stated desire for a physical separation between uses. But it's I think one of the unique features that we have here in Madison is to have some natural surface path that isn't just all asphalt, even though it is not an intentional path there next to the multi-use facility. So just a couple things there. And then also if fishing is provided for, I'm sure that you guys are well aware of the amount of room that fishing and fisher folks take up, when they're in front of Monona Terrace, for example. And I think it's great. I love seeing them out there and interacting with them, but they seem to need a lot of room. And so please just keep that in mind. And even with, folks who have, mobility impairments. They'll often have mobility devices and things like that that are sort of parked in the path when they're fishing. And I would also, I guess, encourage, even if you are going to put benches along the path there, or seating areas or gathering spaces, it's the same thing, to just make sure that there's far enough separation that folks aren't blocking the path even inadvertently. Because that's, I think, probably one of the more frustrating things. When everyone's moving, even when they're at different speeds, I think it's more workable than when you get people who are legitimately stopped and blocking traffic. So that's it. Last thing I did want to ask: did the city turn back on the need to push the buttons at John Nolan and Lakeside for crossing signals? Do you know?
I wonder if Yang is, I don't know. Yang is on the call.
Not a big deal.
Actually, Chris, I'm not sure that those were ever automated. The ones at North Shore, they were?
They were. Yeah. And last night they were not last night.
Yeah.
And I was super frustrated because I sat there through a couple cycles. So I'm just wondering if, because the ones more downtown are still, and it's great. But yeah, I guess if it does change to, permanently having to be pressed, it would be good to have some notice, because otherwise I think a lot of us have grown used to the automatic signals.
Yang, go ahead if you want to answer that, Yang.
I just want to say that we'll check on it.
Okay, thanks.
And I have no personal knowledge on that one, but I know that we changed some back due to various issues, such as emergency vehicles. But we'll check on it and we'll let you know.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that all that you had, Bridget?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Harold, you're next.
Yeah,
thanks, Bridget.
Thanks, and I guess continuing, Yang, maybe if there is an update on that, I'm curious too if that was changed, because last time this was at TC about the automated recall. We had some discussion about that and feedback, so I guess being informed of that would be good. Chris, I think you answered one of my questions already when you answered one of Robbie's, how this ties in with the John Nolan corridor study. And I think we also got one public comment making that point, that where this project stops at North Shore is where some of these larger improvements, such as the underpass or other crossing options for people walking and biking, were really on the table, and some of those required changes to the geometry, possibly of the railroad, of North Shore Drive. So yeah, I think it's important that these projects tie into each other, so I'm glad to hear that that's on your radar. The other point I wanted to make, one of the things that stood out in the public feedback was really the need for, or the desire for it to be less noisy, and I fully understand that. I have that, I personally, my experience being there is like, I wouldn't even want to have a bench there right now, because who wants to sit on a bench where the view is beautiful but the noise level is so high? And so I would encourage you to think about like what can actually be done there. I think a lot of it will depend on what the layout of the roadway and the path is going to be. Are they going to be in separate levels? Is there something that can be done with the pavement? I know in Europe, I think they're using types of asphalt that reduce road noise. Can there be some sort of noise barrier even? I think that would be really valuable to explore and see what can we do to make this roadway less noisy for the people who want to experience the lake. And that's all I had. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Does anybody have any other comments or questions for Chris? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. You got a lot of good feedback there, Chris. So
Yep.
Hopefully that's what you were looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to Odana Road then.
All right, I'm back. I'll share my screen. All right, so a little bit of context for Odana Road. We're looking at the portion of Odana Road along Odana Hills Golf Course. So at the top of the page here is Wedgwood Way on the west side, and then on the east side, down here on the bottom right of the page, is the driveway into the golf course. And right along the driveway is a connector path off of the southwest path that right now just ends at Odana Road. I'll quick zoom in. And then it would require bicyclists to just use the kind of standard bike lanes along Odana Road or shared biking parking lane in that regard. So what we're proposing with this project, kind of the general typical section along this length of Odana Road, is to create a two-way bike facility on the street that would be 10 feet wide, plus a 2-foot gutter on the southerly side, by removing the existing parking lane and on-street bike lane in this area. And then between the two-way bike facility and the eastbound travel lane, there'd be a 5-foot buffer marked out with those vertical delineator posts, a westbound travel lane, and then a buffered bike lane and a parking lane on the westbound side. And what we're looking for input from the commission on, both kind of on the general layout, but especially at the east and westerly ends of the project. I think the sheets that were included in here show 3 different alternatives, but what we really have is kind of a combination of 2 different alternatives at either end. I guess I'll start at the easterly end. What we're showing here is removing the existing island on Odana. We kind of mark out a left turn lane. The through lane would kind of continue through to the east, which is kind of shifting a little bit here anyway, to continue east towards Midvale Boulevard. The buffer space here between the two-way bike facility on the south side would get narrowed down to about 4 feet, and we could create kind of an island space here to create a little bit more of a protected movement here for bicyclists, and tighten up the right turn for eastbound traffic onto the driveway into the golf course. The next area, of course, my sheet is going to bounce around here a little bit. For that, of course, that sheet. So the other alternative at the easterly end would be to maintain the existing island, but bump out the curb a little bit more over in this area. And then we could kind of create an extended island with delineators kind of at a tighter spacing throughout this transition area where the eastbound travel lane would kind of move a little bit closer to the bike lane to make that transition to continue east. This would be a little bit less costly just because we won't be removing this island and dealing with all the additional pavement replacement. But we feel as though both alternatives are viable. I'll switch to the westerly end. Alternative 1 on the westerly end, so this is Wedgwood Way, would include bumping out the curb and creating kind of a short stretch of a multi-use path. One thing that we are envisioning for Odana Road long-term is maybe narrowing up the entire length of the roadway, pushing this curb out, and then maybe doing a multi-use path along this entire golf course frontage. But right now, in terms of funds available, we are trying to use some funds that we're saving from doing the protected bike lane on Bassett with that West Washington resurfacing project last year. So we're trying to do a little bit more of a retrofit, more cost-effective project at this point in time. We also have existing bus stops. So this is maintain service to the bus stop in this alternative. And eastbound bikes with this one would have to come off of the on-street bike lane and onto this multi-use path and then into the two-way facility. One thing that we were trying to figure out the best way to handle this merging of the two-way bike facility on this westerly end with the existing eastbound bike lane. So it's a little, it'll be a little awkward for anyone in this bike lane heading east to have to kind of go off street and then back on street, but it would kind of provide for a slower, more recognizable transition area between the two-way and one-way facility. The other nice thing is it maintains a good and logical transition or entrance point for westbound bikes to come onto Wedgwood Way, where we would eventually also have some wayfinding signage to move bicyclists safely through these neighborhood streets to ultimately connect into the westbound path over by Whitney Way. The other alternative, this would also include a little bit of modification on this island just to maintain this turning space that with so few entrance points to this neighborhood on the south side of Odana between Wedgwood and Whitney Way, we do think that this would ultimately be used by some delivery vehicles and things. We'd try to maintain space at least for a typical delivery like FedEx truck to be able to make that movement. The other alternative is a little stranger, I suppose. It would maintain the bus stop location here, and the difference here would be to bring the off-street kind of portion of this path a little bit further south onto Wedgwood Way. I think this is kind of an awkward distance. It's like 50 feet back from the intersection here. But what this alternative allows is for eastbound bikes in this eastbound lane to kind of continue on street. There would be kind of a crossing point here in a potential conflict anyway, for westbound bicyclists turning onto this path. But with this design, we'd include some island space here to really help direct that anybody heading westbound should be using this path as opposed to trying to continue in this eastbound bike lane. But this could potentially be confusing as well. One other thing to kind of show, zoom in here so everybody can kind of see the text. This is kind of our initial thought on the typical section. Would be a 9-foot parking lane on the north side, 5-foot bike lane, 3-foot buffer, 2 10-foot travel lanes, a 5-foot buffer, and the 10-foot cycle track with 2-foot gutter. We're certainly open to input on that typical section here as well. So the drawing on all three is just the same thing that you saw in all two, but we did dimension this out at 43 feet. So this point where, in particular, where westbound bicyclists would be coming onto this street would be kind of awkward for any right-turning vehicles turning off of Odana onto Wedgwood, just from a expectation standpoint. And one other detail that I would like to point out, we would plan to reconstruct the traffic calming island that is out there currently. We would need to modify the size of it a little bit, just provide the space on the south side for the two-way bike facility. And there is also an existing bus stop a little bit further east that we have reached out to Metro, and with some of their route restructuring, they're not sure if this bus stop will even remain. So as an interim solution, what we were thinking is we could provide a bus boarding space on the street, which they do have in other locations throughout the city. The shelter and things could remain. There'd still be the crosswalk serving this stop, but we could mark out a bus boarding area and narrow the cycle track through this area just so that any bicyclists in this two-way facility would recognize that this is an area where something could be happening, especially if a bus is stopped there. I'm going to kick it over to Renee. Renee has assisted with kind of developing these plans to see if there's anything I missed here.
I know, I think that's a good run through. I just want to, we, when we had the protected bike lane money that we didn't need to put towards the Bassett extension, this was one that we had begun having conversations with the parks about, and they didn't feel like they ever needed the parking along this side. And it was a place where people, had made this request when they're trying to make that connection through the neighborhood to get over and onto the West Town path where, now they might come off the Southwest path, cross Odana, but then just want to cross right back. And there's no sidewalk that a person could even ride on. So this felt like kind of an inexpensive project where we could do this two-way cycle track and just improve that connection. So as Jim mentioned, it would get wayfinding to help people, get on there, and find the way through the neighborhood to get over to the West Town path and then back to the Southwest path. So we just kind of wanted to get feedback on these kind of more inexpensive options that Jim drew up to kind of get a feel for this and how you feel about it.
I'm also happy to bring that back up.
Sorry, I was muted there. Robbie, go ahead.
Thanks. So I guess this is mostly aimed at people trying to connect between the two paths, the one that runs along the Beltline and the Southwest path. Okay.
That would be the primary, other than people who obviously live within the neighborhood.
Okay. But there's still going to be westbound bike lanes on the north side. So if people are continuing to Hy-Vee or the West Transfer Point or whatever, they'll stay probably on the north side.
Yep, absolutely. If so, depending on if people are coming down Odana, they would probably just stay in that lane, or if they're depending on their final destination, they might still cross over at the Southwest path. Okay. Or they might go down and cross over later.
Okay. So I know that a while back I thought this would be a perfect location for a floating bus stop so that a bike path would go behind the bus stop. And it looks like you've got that for the mid-block bus stop, but I'm a little unclear what the plan is for the one that's on the corner if the path doesn't swing south quite a bit. I was a little unclear, like how you handled that bus stop right at the corner.
There we go. Jim's got it back up.
Yeah.
So this would function fairly similarly. The path would come behind the bus stop, and this would have a boarding pad area. Now, if there was someone in a wheelchair that was getting on or off of the bus here, kind of the full compliant boarding space would kind of encroach on this path a little bit.
Okay.
And it's kind of hard to see with some of these lines here. There are a few existing trees out here that we are trying to preserve that are on the park's golf course land here.
Okay. But the mid-block one, are you planning on doing a pad that's out into the street?
It would be like painted space on the street. It would be street level, at least at this point.
So somebody would have to come down the curb cut, and then it would be like quite a bit below. I mean, that first step, if you're not using the ramp, if you're not on wheels getting on the bus, that first step is already fairly high. And if you're at street level, that just makes it higher.
Yes.
So I was thinking about a raised pad that would be in the street.
That is something that we could consider. At this point in time, we're trying to do something fairly simple and inexpensive, because it did sound like the import we received from Metro is that the bus stops along the stretch of Odana are pretty likely to be going away with their route restructuring.
Okay.
So we didn't want to make a major investment with this project if those would no longer be bus stops.
Okay, I understand. I just thought this would be a great place to test drive a raised pad for the bus stops.
We did just install a floating bus stop on Bassett.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Maybe I haven't noticed it. Okay. I haven't been taking the bus a lot in the last 2 years.
Is that all you had, Robbie?
Yes, I was just trying to figure out the bus bike lane issue. So I guess actually, let me just ask you: the mid block bus stop. It looks like the path itself would be narrowed. How narrow would it be for two-way traffic?
So it would be what we're showing as far as painting would go. It would be painted at 7 feet with a 2-foot gutter.
Okay.
But that's factoring in. I think this is 8 foot by 20 foot, maybe 25 foot bus boarding area. So it'd be narrowed for about 30 feet or so.
Okay, but 7 feet plus a 2-foot gutter is still enough for people to pass each other slowly.
Yes.
And watch out for transit passengers as well.
Yeah, and obviously, as the bus stop locations with the redesign are finalized, this could be changed. It may not be. It seems likely it won't be needed, and then it wouldn't have to be narrowed. So we're just kind of trying to stay on top of that as well.
Okay. And then I'm sorry. My other question was, I'm a little unclear. What is the buffer between the cycle track and the car traffic? Is it paint, or is it bollards, or is it a curb, or what are you using to protect people from each other?
What we're posing here is paint with those delineator posts that are like on the parking protected bike lane on Bassett.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Harold, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to see this moving along. I know we talked about it early on when COVID hit, and this was one of the potential projects. So I'm glad to see this moving along. Maybe let me start with a higher level question. So you said, this is a project that you're trying to do on the cheap and quickly, which is great. I think we need to take that opportunity. Maybe we can learn something from it and for now provide a safe bike facility for people. But what's the medium to longer plan for Odana, both on this stretch, but then extending in both directions? If there's one.
I mean,
go ahead, Renee.
No, I was going to say, I think I'm not sure that we, have really taken a deep dive onto Odana. I mean, I know, with this section, the thinking is that at some point this would come up, and I don't know, kind of if it's not a short-term project. And I don't know if it's medium or long for, Odana to actually, come up as an engineering project. So, that might impact, depending on how this goes, what we might think about doing on the rest of it. But at this point, we haven't really taken a close look at changes to the rest of Odana.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess the idea is the way you build it, it's not super expensive, and whatever then happens in the future, it's relatively easy and cheap to change because you're not moving much in terms of curbs. I guess the reason I'm asking is because, I am thinking we just installed the mostly buffered bike lanes on Odana west of Whitney Way, which now makes that a much more important connection where I personally don't use the West Beltline path as much anymore because of the bad crossing at Whitney Way, but also because now there's the option to just continue straight on Odana if that's your destination. And so thinking about where people come from and where people go to, and right now, I mean, I guess, so you either, if you want to continue west, you either have the option to use the protected cycle track on the left side and then go through the neighborhood, or you choose the buffered bike lane if you want to go straight on and continue on Odana. You kind of have to know that in advance. So I guess it just seems weird to have bike facilities on both sides, both which have like certain advantages and disadvantages that, I mean, we maybe now better understand. But yeah, I think that's maybe one of my, I'm not even sure if it's a concern, but it seems a little bit convoluted here. The other piece, maybe we can look at, I think the main design question is related to intersections, as you said. So I don't know, we can start west or east. I have thoughts on both of them, I guess. All right, great. So I guess this is like, yeah, the semi-protected design. I think it works. Again, I was thinking the people who want to continue straight onto Odana, or people coming westbound on Odana, so they don't come from the southwest path and want to get onto the cycle track. So I think that would be something that's difficult with this design. So I think that might, but I guess then they would just be expected to continue straight on the buffered bike lane on the north side. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. So yeah, I think that would be an awkward movement if we want to make that possible. I think getting some data on traffic at that intersection, like turn movements, I think a lot of people do turn into the golf course parking out of it. So I think I appreciate that you're considering a protected or semi-protected intersection design there. But yeah, maybe it needs to be weighed against some other issues. On the other end,
Excuse me, Harold, so do you prefer this one versus the alternative 3? Wasn't there another alternative that didn't look quite like that, Jim?
Yeah, I think there was. Yeah, so
yeah, there we go.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that partly depends on that information about how many about the turn movements there, because I think having a two-way cycle track in an unprotected intersection where there is a lot of turning movements, that could be problematic. So I think whether I prefer one or the other might depend on the details and how much turning movement there is. Okay, maybe we can go to the other side.
Yeah, and to really get a good grasp on those turning movements, we'd probably have to wait until, good summer weather for figuring out how the golf course driveway gets kind of used during peak season.
Right. I guess Streetlight doesn't give you turning data just yet. I think on this end, I don't think I like any of the options that have this like off-street path. I mean, you highlighted some of the downside for the people who do want to, like, they come westbound on the protected bike lane, but then want to transition over to Odana and continue there, because, I mean, there is a bike lane there who don't want to go through the neighborhood. That would be a kind of awkward transition. Then, as you pointed out, like that conflict with eastbound people coming onto Odana from the two directions, I mean, that just seems to be producing more conflict. So I guess that's then alternative one that does not have those. Is that right? Yeah, like where the paths meet the intersection closer to the intersection, I think seems preferable to me.
Excellent. And I maybe didn't note this before, but I think of these alternatives, the staff preference here was this version as well. And then at the other end, it was the one that doesn't look as much like the semi-protected intersection. That kind of had that extended island space where the existing island in the center of Wadena remained.
Okay. Yeah, one minor comment. I'm just looking at the turn templates for people getting onto the path and off to the path, like really making sure that that is smooth, that people are able to stay in their lane and not, have to make too tight a turn. And the bus stop, I wouldn't worry too much about. I just looked it up. There's like 6 boardings a day. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we need a floating bus stop there for now, at least. That's what I got. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Jim, did you get the feedback that you need in order to stay on track with your timing?
I think so. I guess.
Did you get this? Did you get what you needed on the east end? It sounds like you did on the west end, but did you on the east end?
Maybe not quite enough. I maybe just need more of a confirmation. It sounds like Harold would maybe like to know a little bit more about the movements here before.
Can you show us the staff, what you recommend as staff?
Yeah,
which one you recommend?
I think this was our preference.
Okay.
It was a little bit more cost effective and kind of maintained more typical operations with some of the turning movements and how the left turn lane was situated here, as opposed to removing the whole island and kind of resurfacing all of this. If part of the intent is making this a little bit more of a retrofit, lower cost option, this was the way to go.
Does that address your concerns, Harold?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have a super good sense whether one design is superior to the other, to be honest.
Okay.
And so lower cost seems a reasonable thing to do. I don't think it would be vastly less unsafe unless we know that there's so much traffic turning that produces conflict.
Yeah, and I think Jim and I can reach out. I mean, obviously getting those turn moments, I mean, yeah, people will be, if it snows, it's good snow, there'll be users, but it's probably not the same as golf season. So we might be able to get a little bit of information from the Parks Department, but just over kind of on their like typical day versus a high golf day. But obviously, you know, I don't know if streetlight, I mean, we can check, but I doubt they would tell us how people turn into the golf course. Might be a little bit too much.
Right. Are you thinking about green paint through the intersection, presumably? Maybe?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we would be able to do that. I mean, you know, even if we decide in the long term, like this has problems or we've replaced it with something better, that it's not like green paint is forever, so.
Okay, anybody have any other comments? Lots of great feedback this evening. Okay, thanks, Jim. So that great long discussion on the projects, and it looks like we'll be seeing several of them back again. Okay, next we have item number 10, which is a report back from the TPPB members as to what's been going on over there. Chris and Alder Harrington McKinney, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. There was a TPB meeting on this Monday, this week, which was the first one since the last time we met. It was a short agenda, but for folks interested, we reviewed the list of projects that the city is going to submit for the state's active transportation funds. We reviewed the greater Easttown area plan, which included some transit-oriented development and street connections and bike and pedestrian connections around what is now the mall. And we saw the most recent version of the Vision Zero action plan, which included the network that we saw tonight, in addition to some action items. So.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have anything to add?
Thank you very much. I'm at my office and I don't have my notes with me, but it was a very good meeting, especially the presentations brought a lot of in-depth to what was happening on the east side. And so I agree with Chris in his short summary, but it was an excellent meeting. And I'm hoping that some of the PowerPoint that was presented at that meeting shifts over to this body so the commissioners can have a visual look at what we saw on Monday.
Yeah, and we've asked staff for the policy board to include TC members on the agenda, so everybody should have access to that and be able to easily take a look at those slides, Alder. So, yeah, I looked through all of them, and you're right. There's a lot of great information in there. So, if people have an opportunity, take a look. Okay, anything else on that item? Okay, announcements. You got an email from Aiden back on January 7th with regard to a survey related to the urban triage training sessions on transformative leadership. And that survey is due by Friday, January 14th. If you haven't already, we'd appreciate your feedback. As you recall, urban triage was selected through the request for proposals back in 2021 to help with requests by TC and TPPB members to address our potentially unintentional bias and listening challenges as we deliberate our transportation issues. And the RFP was titled Racial Equity, Bias and Inclusion Training, but it really was aimed at us being better at making transportation decisions in light of all the feedback from the community. So that's our goal. 6 sessions on non-TC Wednesdays starting February 2nd and starting at 5 o'clock. So Gretchen is looking to determine how many people are going to be able to come so that Urban Triage has some idea. So please take a look at that if you haven't already. Does anybody want Aiden to resend it? Would it be easier if he just popped the email back out to everybody? If you would. Okay, Aiden, would you just send it out to everybody again so that people have a chance to see it again? Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have a comment?
I have a question. Will these be recorded? Will these sessions be recorded?
I don't think so. I don't think Gretchen is on. Yang, I think we talked about that, and we were not planning to have them be recorded. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But yeah, there will be a. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the thought is that everyone feels more comfortable to speak up, to be comfortable. To be honest, at a training. So, but
yeah,
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Yang. Finish what you're going to say.
Okay, but I'm sure that the consultant has some suggestions as well, and also being flexible. So if the group later wants to change wants to record part of the training, that may be possible.
Yeah. Well, in response to people perhaps not being able to attend all of the sessions, we did make the request that they prepare an after-session summary to be distributed. And I think there was even a little bit, so we did make that request, and Urban Triage will do that. So say you can only go to 5 of the 6 of them, and you're going to miss one. And I asked this question because, you never know. It's possible that we might miss one. So they are going to send notes and a summary of the session to people so that if you do happen to miss one, or you want to have those notes and you want to take a look at them and think about them before the next meeting. So that was an additional request that we made. So hopefully that will help in that regard to capture all of the important concepts that are discussed, so that everybody can have that information, even if the sessions aren't recorded. So it'll allow us to refresh our memories and to catch up on anything that we might have missed. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to confirm. I think based on the email, my understanding is these sessions are going to be 3 hours long, and the intent is that everybody attends all 6, correct?
Yes, it's a maximum of 3 hours, and we would hope that everybody would attend all 6. The sessions are not mandatory, of course. It's voluntary in terms of who wants to come, but this was a request that members of both TC and TPPB made, that we offer this training. So I'm very hopeful that we'll have a lot of people attend.
Right. Just want to make sure I understand, because it's a maximum of 3 hours, which means probably 3 hours. Okay.
Probably, but we talked about potentially doing it on weekends, but then there's morning, noon, afternoon. It got really in the way of families, and so this was determined to be the best alternative. It means for us on TC, it means every Wednesday for a while, because we'll have a TC meeting one week and then training the next week. But at least we all know it's on Wednesday and when they are. And we do have the after session summaries if we happen to not be able to attend one of them. So, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, you covered it well. Thank you, Ann.
Okay. All right. Does that help, Harold? Okay. All right. Anybody have any other questions about that? So Aiden will send it out to everybody again. And if you haven't had a chance to fill out the survey, we would appreciate getting that information. And we're still, as far as I know, I haven't heard of the last vacancy on TC being filled yet, but we've been in contact with the mayor's office. Although, unless Yang, you have some info on that, or go ahead. Harold,
yes, thank you.
Did you have any more, Harold, or were you finished with? Okay, go ahead, Yang.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, I just want to let the commission know that I know the mayor's office has been actively working on it.
Okay.
And, it's possible that the appointment might be introduced soon for the next council meeting. So we may have some new member in February.
That's excellent news. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's all I had for announcements. In terms of agenda items for the next meeting, it's a pretty short list, but it was last time, and we ended up with a lot of referrals from the council, and we ended up with a lot of projects to talk about from engineering, and so and Safe Streets Madison is on the list, and if that comes in, that'll should be a substantial presentation. So does anybody have anything else other than what's preliminarily included on the agenda items that's in Legistar? Anybody have anything else to add? Or for future meetings beyond? Okay, you can always email Aiden or myself, and we'll certainly consider any suggestions that you have. So you're always welcome to do that. So that's all. It looks like Aiden sent the email out already, so you should all have it in your inboxes. So I need a motion to adjourn, and thanks everybody for all your great feedback tonight. Harold. Oh, I don't think you can, Harold. Sorry.
Oh, right.
Yeah, sorry. Bridget, you want to move? All right, and Alder Miazzi. Okay, sorry, Harold. I assume it's a unanimous consent vote that we adjourn, and thanks everybody for all your participation. And Harold, we welcome all of your feedback. You know that, very important member in terms of hearing from you. So thanks everybody, and take good care. We'll see you.